Chapter 51. The Flight. When D'Artagnan returned to the Palais Royal at 5 o'clock, it presented, in spite of the excitement which reigned in the town, a spectacle of the greatest rejoicing. Nor was that surprising. The Queen had restored Broussel and Blancmesnil to the people and had therefore nothing to fear, since the people had nothing more just then to ask for. The return, also, of the conqueror of Lens was the pretext for giving a grand banquet. The princes and princesses were invited and their carriages had crowded the court since noon. Then after dinner the Queen was to have a play in her apartment. Anne of Austria had never appeared more brilliant than on that day, radiant with grace and wit. Mazarin disappeared as they rose from table. He found D'Artagnan waiting for him already at his post in the anteroom. The cardinal advanced to him with a smile and taking him by the hand led him into his study. "My dear M. D'Artagnan," said the minister, sitting down, "I am about to give you the greatest proof of confidence that a minister can give an officer." "I hope," said D'Artagnan, bowing, "that you give it, my lord, without hesitation and with the conviction that I am worthy of it. More worthy than anyone in Paris, my dear friend. Therefore I apply to you." "We are about to leave this evening," continued Mazarin. "My dear M. D'Artagnan, the welfare of the state is deposited in your hands." He paused. "Explain yourself, my lord." "I am listening." "The Queen has resolved to make a little excursion with the king to Saint-Germain." "Aha!" said D'Artagnan. "That is to say, the Queen wishes to leave Paris. A woman's caprice, you understand." "Yes, I understand perfectly," said D'Artagnan. "It was for this she summoned you this morning, and that she told you to return at 5 o'clock. Was it worth while to wish me to swear this morning that I would mention the appointment to no one?" muttered D'Artagnan. "Oh, women! Women! Whether queens or not, they are always the same. Do you disapprove of this journey, my dear M. D'Artagnan?" asked Mazarin anxiously. "I, my lord," said D'Artagnan. "Why should I?" "Because you shrug your shoulders. It is a way I have of speaking to myself. I neither approve nor disapprove, my lord. I merely await your commands." "Good. It is you, accordingly, that I have pitched upon to conduct the king and the queen to Saint-Germain." "Liar!" thought D'Artagnan. "You see, therefore," continued the cardinal, perceiving D'Artagnan's composure, "that, as I have told you, the welfare of the state is placed in your hands." "Yes, my lord, and I feel the whole responsibility of such a charge." "You accept, however?" "I always accept." "Do you think the thing possible?" "Everything is possible." "Shall you be attacked on the road?" "Probably." "And what will you do in that case?" "I shall pass through those who attack me." "And suppose you cannot pass through them?" "So much the worse for them. I shall pass over them." "And you will place the king and queen in safety also at Saint-Germain?" "Yes." "On your life." "On my life." "You are a hero, my friend," said Mazarin, gazing at the Musketeer with admiration. D'Artagnan smiled. "And I?" asked Mazarin after a moment's silence. "How? And you, my lord?" "If I wish to leave, that would be much more difficult." "Why so?" "Your eminence might be recognized." "Even under this disguise?" asked Mazarin, raising a cloak which covered an armchair, upon which lay a complete dress for an officer, of pearl gray and red, entirely embroidered with silver. "If your eminence is disguised, it will be almost easy." "Ah!" said Mazarin, breathing more freely. "But it will be necessary for your eminence to do what the other day you declared you should have done in our place. Cry, 'Down with Mazarin!' I will, 'Down with Mazarin!' In French, in good French, my lord. Take care of your accent. They killed 6,000 Angevins in Sicily because they pronounced Italian badly. Take care that the French do not take their revenge on you for the Sicilian Vespers." "I will do my best." "The streets are full of armed men," continued D'Artagnan. "Are you sure that no one is aware of the Queen's project?" Mazarin reflected. "This affair would give a fine opportunity for a traitor, my lord. The chance of being attacked would be an excuse for everything." Mazarin shuddered, but he reflected that a man who had the least intention to betray would not warn first. "And therefore," added he quietly, I have not confidence in everyone, the proof of which is that I have fixed upon you to escort me. Shall you not go with the queen? No, replied Mazarin. Then you will start after the queen? No, said Mazarin again. Ah, said D'Artagnan, who began to understand. Yes, continued the cardinal. I have my plan. With the queen I double her risk. After the queen her departure would double mine. Then, the court once safe, I might be forgotten. The great are often ungrateful. Very true, said D'Artagnan, fixing his eyes, in spite of himself, on the queen's diamond, which Mazarin wore on his finger. Mazarin followed the direction of his eyes and gently turned the hoop of the ring inside. I wish, he said with his cunning smile, to prevent them from being ungrateful to me. It is but Christian charity, replied D'Artagnan, not to lead one's neighbors into temptation. It is exactly for that reason, said Mazarin, that I wish to start before them. D'Artagnan smiled. He was just the man to understand the astute Italian. Mazarin saw the smile and profited by the moment. You will begin, therefore, by taking me first out of Paris, will you not, my dear M. D'Artagnan? A difficult commission, my lord, replied D'Artagnan, resuming his serious manner. But, said Mazarin, you did not make so many difficulties with regard to the king and queen. The king and the queen are my king and queen, replied the Musketeer. My life is theirs, and I must give it for them. If they ask it, what have I to say? That is true, murmured Mazarin in a low tone. But as thy life is not mine, I suppose I must buy it, must I not? And sighing deeply, he began to turn the hoop of his ring outside again. D'Artagnan smiled. These two men met at one point, and that was cunning. Had they been actuated equally by courage, the one would have done great things for the other. But also, said Mazarin, you must understand that if I ask this service from you, it is with the intention of being grateful. Is it still only an intention, your eminence? Asked D'Artagnan. Stay, said Mazarin, drawing the ring from his finger. My dear D'Artagnan, there is a diamond which belonged to you formerly. It is but just it should return to you. Take it, I pray. D'Artagnan spared Mazarin the trouble of insisting, and after looking to see if the stone was the same and assuring himself of the purity of its water, he took it and passed it on his finger with indescribable pleasure. I valued it much, said Mazarin, giving a last look at it. Nevertheless, I give it to you with great pleasure. And I, my lord, said D'Artagnan, accept it as it is given. Come, let us speak of your little affairs. You wish to leave before everybody, and at what hour? At 10 o'clock. And the queen, at what time is it her wish to start? At midnight. Then it is possible. I can get you out of Paris and leave you beyond the barrier, and can return for her. Capital. But how will you get me out of Paris? Oh, as to that, you must leave it to me. I give you absolute power, therefore. Take as large an escort as you like. D'Artagnan shook his head. It seems to me, however, said Mazarin, the safest method. Yes, for you, my lord, but not for the queen. You must leave it to me and give me the entire direction of the undertaking. Nevertheless, or find someone else, continued D'Artagnan, turning his back. Oh, muttered Mazarin, I do believe he is going off with the diamond. D'Artagnan, my dear D'Artagnan, he called out in a coaxing voice. Will you answer for everything? I will answer for nothing. I will do my best. Well, then, let us go. I must trust to you. It is very fortunate, said D'Artagnan to himself. You will be here at 9:30. And I shall find your eminence ready? Certainly, quite ready. Well, then, it is a settled thing. And now, my lord, will you obtain for me an audience with the queen? For what purpose? I wish to receive Her Majesty's commands from her own lips. She desired me to give them to you. She may have forgotten something. You really wish to see her? It is indispensable, my lord. Mazarin hesitated for one instant, but D'Artagnan was firm. Come, then, said the minister. I will conduct you to her, but remember, not one word of our conversation. What has passed between us concerns ourselves alone, my lord, replied D'Artagnan. Swear to be mute. "I never swear, my lord, I say yes or no, and, as I am a gentleman, I keep my word. Come, then. I see that I must trust unreservedly to you. Believe me, my lord, it will be your best plan." "Come," said Mazarin, conducting D'Artagnan into the Queen's oratory and desiring him to wait there. He did not wait long, for in 5 minutes the Queen entered in full gala costume. Thus dressed, she scarcely appeared 35 years of age. She was still exceedingly handsome. "It is you, Monsieur d'Artagnan," she said, smiling graciously. "I thank you for having insisted on seeing me. I ought to ask your Majesty's pardon, but I wished to receive your commands from your own mouth. Do you accept the commission which I have entrusted to you?" "With gratitude." "Very well, be here at midnight." "I will not fail." "Monsieur d'Artagnan," continued the Queen, "I know your disinterestedness too well to speak of my own gratitude at such a moment, but I swear to you that I shall not forget this second service as I forgot the first. Your Majesty is free to forget or to remember, as it pleases you, and I know not what you mean," said D'Artagnan, bowing. "Go, sir," said the Queen, with her most bewitching smile. "Go and return at midnight." And D'Artagnan retired, but as he passed out he glanced at the curtain through which the Queen had entered, and at the bottom of the tapestry he remarked the tip of a velvet slipper. "Good," thought he. "Mazarin has been listening to discover whether I betrayed him. In truth, that Italian puppet does not deserve the services of an honest man." D'Artagnan was not less exact to his appointment, and at 9:30 he entered the anteroom. He found the cardinal dressed as an officer, and he looked very well in that costume, which, as we have already said, he wore elegantly, only he was very pale and trembled slightly. "Quite alone?" he asked. "Yes, my lord." "And that worthy Monsieur du Vallon, are we not to enjoy his society?" "Certainly, my lord. He is waiting in his carriage at the gate of the garden of the Palais Royal." "And we start in his carriage, then?" "Yes, my lord." "And with us no other escort but you two? Is it not enough? One of us would suffice." "Really, my dear Monsieur d'Artagnan," said the cardinal, "your coolness startles me. I should have thought, on the contrary, that it ought to have inspired you with confidence. And Bernouin, do I not take him with me?" "There is no room for him. He will rejoin your eminence." "Let us go," said Mazarin, "since everything must be done as you wish." "My lord, there is time to draw back," said D'Artagnan, "and your eminence is perfectly free." "Not at all, not at all," said Mazarin. "Let us be off." And so they descended the private stair, Mazarin leaning on the arm of D'Artagnan, a hand the Musketeer felt trembling. At last, after crossing the courts of the Palais Royal, where there still remained some of the conveyances of late guests, they entered the garden and reached the little gate. Mazarin attempted to open it by a key which he took from his pocket, but with such shaking fingers that he could not find the keyhole. "Give it to me," said D'Artagnan, who when the gate was opened deposited the key in his pocket, reckoning upon returning by that gate. The steps were already down and the door open. Mousqueton stood at the door and Porthos was inside the carriage. "Mount, my lord," said D'Artagnan to Mazarin, who sprang into the carriage without waiting for a second bidding. D'Artagnan followed him, and Mousqueton, having closed the door, mounted behind the carriage with many groans. He had made some difficulties about going, under pretext that he still suffered from his wound, but D'Artagnan had said to him, "Remain if you like, my dear Monsieur Mouston, but I warn you that Paris will be burnt down tonight." Upon which Mousqueton had declared, without asking anything further, that he was ready to follow his master and Monsieur d'Artagnan to the end of the world. The carriage started at a measured pace, without betraying by the slightest sign that it contained people in a hurry. The cardinal wiped his forehead with his handkerchief and looked around him. On his left was Porthos, whilst D'Artagnan was on his right. Each guarded a door and served as a rampart to him on either side. Before him, on the front seat, lay 2 pairs of pistols, one in front of Porthos and the other of D'Artagnan. About 100 paces from the Palais Royal a patrol stopped the carriage. "Who goes?" asked the captain. "Mazarin," replied D'Artagnan, bursting into a laugh. The cardinal's hair stood on end. But the joke appeared an excellent one to the citizens, who, seeing the conveyance without escort and unarmed, would never have believed in the possibility of so great an imprudence. "A good journey to ye," they cried, allowing it to pass. "Hem," said D'Artagnan. "What does my lord think of that reply?" "Man of talent," cried Mazarin. "In truth," said Porthos, "I understand. But now, about the middle of the Rue de Petit Champs, they were stopped by a second patrol. "Who goes there?" inquired the captain of the patrol. "Keep back, my lord," said D'Artagnan, and Mazarin buried himself so far behind the two friends that he disappeared, completely hidden between them. "Who goes there?" cried the same voice, impatiently, whilst D'Artagnan perceived that they had rushed to the horses' heads. But putting his head out of the carriage, "Planchet," said he. The chief approached, and it was indeed Planchet. D'Artagnan had recognized the voice of his old servant. "How, sir?" said Planchet. "Is it you?" Mon Dieu. Yes, my good friend. This worthy Porthos has just received a sword wound, and I am taking him to his country house at St. Cloud." "Oh, really?" said Planchet. "Porthos," said D'Artagnan, "if you can still speak, say a word, my dear Porthos, to this good Planchet." "Planchet, my friend," said Porthos in a melancholy voice, "I am very ill. Should you meet a doctor, you will do me a favor by sending him to me." "Oh, good heaven," said Planchet. "What a misfortune! And how did it happen?" "I will tell you all about it," replied Musketeer. Porthos uttered a deep groan. "Make way for us, Planchet," said D'Artagnan in a whisper to him, "or he will not arrive alive. The lungs are attacked, my friend." Planchet shook his head with the air of a man who says, "In that case things look ill." Then he exclaimed, turning to his men, "Let them pass. They are friends." The carriage resumed its course, and Mazarin, who had held his breath, ventured to breathe again. "Bracconi," muttered he. A few steps in advance of the gate of St. Honoré they met a third troop. This latter party was composed of ill-looking fellows, who resembled bandits more than anything else. They were the men of the beggar of St. Eustache. "Attention, Porthos!" cried D'Artagnan. Porthos placed his hand on the pistols. "What is it?" asked Mazarin. "My lord, I think we are in bad company." A man advanced to the door with a kind of scythe in his hand. "Que vive?" he asked. Rascal," said D'Artagnan. "Do you not recognize His Highness the Prince's carriage?" "Prince or not," said the man, "open. We are here to guard the gate, and no one whom we do not know shall pass." "What is to be done?" said Porthos. "Pardieu, pass," replied D'Artagnan. "But how?" asked Mazarin. "Through or over? Coachman, gallop on." The coachman raised his whip. "Not a step further," said the man, who appeared to be the captain, "or I will hamstring your horses." "Peste," said Porthos. "It would be a pity. Animals which cost me 100 pistoles each." "I will pay you 200 for them," said Mazarin. "Yes, but when once they are hamstrung, our necks will be strung next." "If one of them comes to my side," asked Porthos, "must I kill him?" "Yes, by a blow of your fist, if you can. We will not fire but at the last extremity." "I can do it," said Porthos. "Come and open, then," cried D'Artagnan to the man with the scythe, taking one of the pistols up by the muzzle and preparing to strike with the handle. And as the man approached, D'Artagnan, in order to have more freedom for his actions, leaned half out of the door. His eyes were fixed upon those of the mendicant, which were lighted up by a lantern. Without doubt he recognized D'Artagnan, for he became deadly pale. Doubtless the Musketeer knew him, for his hair stood up on his head. "Monsieur d'Artagnan," he cried, falling back a step. "It is Monsieur d'Artagnan. Let him pass." D'Artagnan was perhaps about to reply, when a blow, similar to that of a mallet falling on the head of an ox, was heard. The noise was caused by Porthos, who had just knocked down his man. D'Artagnan turned around and saw the unfortunate man upon his back about 4 paces off. "'Sdeath!" cried he to the coachman. "Spur your horses. Whip, get on." The coachman bestowed a heavy blow of the whip upon his horses. The noble animals bounded forward. Then cries of men who were knocked down were heard. Then a double concussion was felt, and two of the wheels seemed to pass over a round and flexible body. There was a moment's silence. Then the carriage cleared the gate. "To cours la reine!" cried D'Artagnan to the coachman. Then turning to Mazarin he said, "Now, my lord, you can say 5 paters and 5 aves, in thanks to heaven for your deliverance. You are safe, you are free." Mazarin replied only by a groan. He could not believe in such a miracle. 5 minutes later the carriage stopped, having reached cours la reine. "Is my lord pleased with his escort?" asked D'Artagnan. "Enchanted, monsieur," said Mazarin, venturing his head out of one of the windows. "And now do as much for the queen." "It will not be so difficult," replied D'Artagnan, springing to the ground. "Monsieur du Vallon, I commend his eminence to your care." "Be quite at ease," said Porthos, holding out his hand, which D'Artagnan took and shook in his. "Oh!" cried Porthos, as if in pain. D'Artagnan looked with surprise at his friend. "What is the matter, then?" he asked. "I think I have sprained my wrist," said Porthos. "The devil! Why, you strike like a blind or a deaf man." "It was necessary. My man was going to fire a pistol at me. But you, how did you get rid of yours?" "Oh, mine," replied D'Artagnan, "was not a man." "What was it then?" "It was an apparition, and I charmed it away." Without further explanation D'Artagnan took the pistols which were upon the front seat, placed them in his belt, wrapped himself in his cloak, and not wishing to enter by the same gate as that through which they had left, he took his way toward the Richelieu gate. Chapter 52. The carriage of Monsieur le Coadjuteur. Instead of returning, then, by the Saint-Honoré gate, D'Artagnan, who had time before him, walked around and re-entered by the Porte Richelieu. He was approached to be examined, and when it was discovered by his plumed hat and his laced coat that he was an officer of the Musketeers, he was surrounded with the intention of making him cry, "Down with Mazarin!" The demonstration did not fail to make him uneasy at first, but when he discovered what it meant, he shouted it in such a voice that even the most exacting were satisfied. He walked down the Rue Richelieu, meditating how he should carry off the queen in her turn, for to take her in a carriage bearing the arms of France was not to be thought of, when he perceived an equipage standing at the door of the hotel belonging to Madame de Guémeny. He was struck by a sudden idea. "Ah, pardieu!" he exclaimed. "That would be fair play." And approaching the carriage, he examined the arms on the panels and the livery of the coachman on his box. This scrutiny was so much the more easy, the coachman being sound asleep. "It is, in truth, Monsieur le Coadjuteur's carriage," said D'Artagnan. "Upon my honor, I begin to think that heaven favors us." He mounted noiselessly into the chariot and pulled the silk cord which was attached to the coachman's little finger. "To the Palais Royal," he called out. The coachman awoke with a start and drove off in the direction he was desired, never doubting but that the order had come from his master. The porter at the palace was about to close the gates, but seeing such a handsome equipage, he fancied that it was some visit of importance, and the carriage was allowed to pass and to stop beneath the porch. It was then only the coachman perceived the grooms were not behind the vehicle. He fancied Monsieur le Coadjuteur had sent them back, and without dropping the reins he sprang from his box to open the door. D'Artagnan, in his turn, sprang to the ground, and just at the moment when the coachman, alarmed at not seeing his master, fell back a step, he seized him by his collar with the left, whilst with the right hand he placed the muzzle of a pistol at his breast. "Pronounce one single word," muttered D'Artagnan, "and you are a dead man." The coachman perceived at once, by the expression of the man who thus addressed him, that he had fallen into a trap, and he remained with his mouth wide open and his eyes portentously staring. 2 musketeers were pacing the court, to whom D'Artagnan called by their names. "Monsieur de Belliere," said he to one of them, "do me the favor to take the reins from the hands of this worthy man, mount upon the box and drive to the door of the private stair, and wait for me there. It is an affair of importance on the service of the king." The musketeer, who knew that his lieutenant was incapable of jesting with regard to the service, obeyed without a word, although he thought the order strange. Then turning toward the second musketeer, D'Artagnan said, "Monsieur du Verger, help me to place this man in a place of safety." The musketeer, thinking that his lieutenant had just arrested some prince in disguise, bowed, and drawing his sword, signified that he was ready. D'Artagnan mounted the staircase, followed by his prisoner, who in his turn was followed by the soldier, and entered Mazarin's anteroom. Bernouin was waiting there, impatient for news of his master. "Well, sir," he said, "everything goes on capitally, my dear Monsieur Bernouin, but here is a man whom I must beg you to put in a safe place." "Where, then, sir?" "Where you like, provided that the place which you shall choose has iron shutters secured by padlocks and a door that can be locked." "We have that, sir," replied Bernouin, and the poor coachman was conducted to a closet, the windows of which were barred and which looked very much like a prison. "And now, my good friend," said D'Artagnan to him, "I must invite you to deprive yourself, for my sake, of your hat and cloak." The coachman, as we can well understand, made no resistance. In fact, he was so astonished at what had happened to him that he stammered and reeled like a drunken man. D'Artagnan deposited his clothes under the arm of one of the valets. "And now, Monsieur du Verger," he said, "shut yourself up with this man until Monsieur Bernouin returns to open the door. The duty will be tolerably long and not very amusing, I know, but," added he seriously, "you understand it is on the king's service." "At your command, lieutenant," replied the Musketeer, who saw the business was a serious one. "By the by," continued D'Artagnan, "should this man attempt to fly or to call out, pass your sword through his body." The Musketeer signified by a nod that these commands should be obeyed to the letter, and D'Artagnan went out, followed by Bernouin. Midnight struck. "Lead me into the Queen's oratory," said D'Artagnan. "Announce to her I am here, and put this parcel, with a well-loaded musket, under the seat of the carriage which is waiting at the foot of the private stair." Bernouin conducted D'Artagnan to the oratory, where he sat down pensively. Everything had gone on as usual at the Palais Royal. As we said before, by 10 o'clock almost all the guests had dispersed. Those who were to fly with the court had the word of command, and they were each severally desired to be from 12 o'clock to 1 at Cours la Reine. At 10 o'clock Anne of Austria had entered the king's room. Monsieur had just retired, and the youthful Louis, remaining the last, was amusing himself by placing some lead soldiers in a line of battle, a game which delighted him much. 2 royal pages were playing with him. "Laporte," said the queen, "it is time for his majesty to go to bed." The king asked to remain up, having, he said, no wish to sleep. But the queen was firm. "Are you not going tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, Louis, to bathe at Conflans? I think you wish to do so of your own accord." "You are right, madame," said the king, "and I am ready to retire to my room when you have kissed me. Laporte, give the light to Monsieur the Chevalier de Coislin." The queen touched with her lips the white, smooth brow the royal child presented to her with a gravity which already partook of etiquette. "Go to sleep soon, Louis," said the queen, "for you must be awakened very early." "I will do my best to obey you, madame," said the youthful king, "but I have no inclination to sleep." "Laporte," said Anne of Austria in an undertone, "find some very dull book to read to his majesty, but do not undress yourself." The king went out, accompanied by the Chevalier de Coislin, bearing the candlestick, and then the queen returned to her own apartment. Her ladies, that is to say Madame de Bregy, Mademoiselle de Beaumont, Madame de Motteville, and Socratine, her sister, so called on account of her sense, had just brought into her dressing-room the remains of the dinner, on which, according to her usual custom, she supped. The queen then gave her orders, spoke of a banquet which the Marquis de Villequier was to give to her on the day after the morrow, indicated the persons she would admit to the honor of partaking of it, announced another visit on the following day to Val-de-Grace, where she intended to pay her devotions, and gave her commands to her senior valet to accompany her. When the ladies had finished their supper, the queen feigned extreme fatigue and passed into her bedroom. Madame de Motteville, who was on a special duty that evening, followed to aid and undress her. The queen then began to read, and after conversing with her affectionately for a few minutes, dismissed her. It was at this moment D'Artagnan entered the courtyard of the palace, in the coadjutor's carriage, and a few seconds later the carriages of the ladies-in-waiting drove out and the gates were shut after them. A few minutes after 12 o'clock Bernouin knocked at the queen's bedroom door, having come by the cardinal's secret corridor. Anne of Austria opened the door to him herself. She was dressed, that is to say, in dishabille, wrapped in a long, warm dressing-gown. "It is you, Bernouin," she said. "Is Monsieur d'Artagnan there?" "Yes, madam, in your oratory. He is waiting till your majesty is ready." "I am. Go and tell Laporte to wake and dress the king, and then pass on to the Marechal de Villeroy and summon him to me." Bernouin bowed and retired. The queen entered her oratory, which was lighted by a single lamp of Venetian crystal. She saw D'Artagnan, who stood expecting her. "Is it you?" she said. "Yes, madam." "Are you ready?" "I am." "And his Eminence, the Cardinal?" "Has got off without any accident. He is awaiting your majesty at Cours-la-Reine." "But in what carriage do we start?" "I have provided for everything. A carriage below is waiting for your majesty." "Let us go to the king." D'Artagnan bowed and followed the queen. The young Louis was already dressed, with the exception of his shoes and doublet. He had allowed himself to be dressed, in great astonishment, overwhelming Laporte with questions, who replied only in these words, "Sire, it is by the queen's commands." The bedclothes were thrown back, exposing the king's bed linen, which was so worn that here and there holes could be seen. It was one of the results of Mazarin's niggardliness. The queen entered and D'Artagnan remained at the door. As soon as the child perceived the queen, he escaped from Laporte and ran to meet her, and then motioned to D'Artagnan to approach, and he obeyed. "My son," said Anne of Austria, pointing to the Musketeer, calm, standing uncovered. "Here is Monsieur d'Artagnan, who is as brave as one of those ancient heroes of whom you like so much to hear from my women. Remember his name well and look at him well, that his face may not be forgotten, for this evening he is going to render us a great service." The young king looked at the officer with his large-formed eye, and repeated, "Monsieur d'Artagnan." "That is it, my son." The young king slowly raised his little hand and held it out to the Musketeer. The latter bent on his knee and kissed it. "Monsieur d'Artagnan," repeated Louis. "Very well, madame." At this moment they were startled by a noise as if a tumult were approaching. "What is that?" exclaimed the queen. "Oh, oh!" replied D'Artagnan, straining both at the same time his quick ear and his intelligent glance. "It is the murmur of the populace in revolution." "We must fly," said the queen. "Your majesty has given me the control of this business. We had better wait and see what they want." "Monsieur d'Artagnan, I will answer for everything." Nothing is so catching as confidence. The queen, full of energy and courage, was quickly alive to these two virtues in others. "Do as you like," she said. "I rely upon you. Will your majesty permit me to give orders in your name throughout this business?" "Command, sir." "What do the people want this time?" demanded the king. "We are about to ascertain, sire," replied D'Artagnan, as he rapidly left the room. The tumult continued to increase and seemed to surround the Palais Royal entirely. Cries were heard from the interior, of which they could not comprehend the sense. It was evident that there was clamor and sedition. The king, half-dressed, the queen and Laporte remained each in the same state and almost in the same place, where they were listening and waiting. Comminges, who was on guard that night at the Palais Royal, ran in. He had about 200 men in the courtyards and stables, and he placed them at the queen's disposal. "Well?" asked Anne of Austria, when D'Artagnan reappeared. "What does it mean?" "It means, madame, that the report has spread that the queen has left the Palais Royal, carrying off the king, and the people ask to have proof to the contrary, or threaten to demolish the Palais Royal." "Oh, this time it is too much!" exclaimed the queen. "And I will prove to them I have not left." D'Artagnan saw from the expression of the queen's face that she was about to issue some violent command. He approached her and said in a low voice, "Has your majesty still confidence in me?" This voice startled her. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Every confidence. Speak. Will the queen deign to follow my advice? Speak. Let your majesty dismiss M. de Comminges and desire him to shut himself up with his men in the guardhouse and in the stables." Comminges glanced at D'Artagnan with the envious look with which every courtier sees a new favorite spring up. "You hear, Comminges?" said the queen. D'Artagnan went up to him. With his usual quickness he caught the anxious glance. "Monsieur de Comminges," he said, "pardon me, We both are servants of the queen, are we not? It is my turn to be of use to her. Do not envy me this happiness." Comminges bowed and left. "Come," said D'Artagnan to himself, "I have got one more enemy." "And now," said the queen, addressing D'Artagnan, "what is to be done? For you hear that, instead of becoming calmer, the noise increases." "Madame," said D'Artagnan, "the people want to see the king, and they must see him." "What? Must see him? Where, on the balcony?" "Not at all, madame, but here, sleeping in his bed." "Oh, your majesty!" exclaimed Laporte. "Monsieur d'Artagnan is right." The queen became thoughtful and smiled, like a woman to whom duplicity is no stranger. "Without doubt," she murmured. "Monsieur Laporte," said D'Artagnan, "go and announce to the people through the grating that they are going to be satisfied, and that in 5 minutes they shall not only see the king, but they shall see him in bed. Add that the king sleeps and that the queen begs that they will keep silence, so as not to awaken him. But not everyone, a deputation of 2 or 4 people. Every one, madam. But reflect, they will keep us here till daybreak. It shall take but a quarter of an hour. I answer for everything, madam. Believe me, I know the people. They are like a great child who only wants humoring. Before the sleeping king they will be mute, gentle and timid as lambs." "Go, Laporte," said the queen. The young king approached his mother and said, "Why do as these people ask?" "It must be so, my son," said Anne of Austria. "But if they say, 'It must be to me, am I no longer king?'" The queen remained silent. "Sire," said D'Artagnan, "will your majesty permit me to ask you a question?" Louis XIV turned around, astonished that anyone should dare to address him. But the queen pressed the child's hand. "Yes, sir," he said. "Does your majesty remember, when playing in the park of Fontainebleau, or in the palace courts at Versailles, ever to have seen the sky grow suddenly dark and heard the sound of thunder?" "Yes, certainly." "Well, then, this noise of thunder, however much your majesty may have wished to continue playing, has said, 'Go in, sire. You must do so.'" "Certainly, sir. But they tell me that the noise of thunder is the voice of God." "Well then, sire," continued D'Artagnan, "listen to the noise of the people. You will perceive that it resembles that of thunder." In truth, at that moment a terrible murmur was wafted to them by the night breeze. Then all at once it ceased. "Hold, sire," said D'Artagnan. "They have just told the people that you are asleep. You see, you still are king." The queen looked with surprise at this strange man, whose brilliant courage made him the equal of the bravest, and who was, by his fine and quick intelligence, the equal of the most astute. Laporte entered. "Well, Laporte?" asked the queen. "Madame," he replied, "Monsieur d'Artagnan's prediction has been accomplished. They are calm, as if by enchantment. The doors are about to be opened, and in 5 minutes they will be here." "Laporte," said the queen, "suppose you put one of your sons in the king's place. We might be off during the time." "If your majesty desires it," said Laporte. "My sons, like myself, are at the queen's service." "Not at all," said D'Artagnan. "Should one of them know his majesty and discover but a substitute, all would be lost." "You are right, sir, always right," said Anne of Austria. "Laporte, place the king in bed." Laporte placed the king, dressed as he was, in the bed and then covered him as far as the shoulders with the sheet. The queen bent over him and kissed his brow. "Pretend to sleep, Louis," said she. "Yes," said the king, "but I do not wish to be touched by any of those men." "Sire, I am here," said D'Artagnan, "and I give you my word that if a single man has the audacity, his life shall pay for it." "And now what is to be done?" asked the queen, "for I hear them." "Monsieur Laporte, go to them and again recommend silence. Madame, wait at the door, whilst I shall be at the head of the king's bed, ready to die for him." Laporte went out. The queen remained standing near the hangings, whilst D'Artagnan glided behind the curtains. Then the heavy and collected steps of a multitude of men were heard, and the queen herself raised the tapestry hangings and put her finger on her lips. On seeing the queen, the men stopped short respectfully. "Enter, gentlemen, enter," said the queen. There was then amongst that crowd a moment's hesitation, which looked like shame. They had expected resistance, they had expected to be thwarted, to have to force the gates, to overturn the guards. The gates had opened of themselves, and the king, ostensibly at least, had no other guard at his bedhead but his mother. The foremost of them stammered and attempted to fall back. "Enter, gentlemen," said Laporte, "since the queen desires you so to do." Then one more bold than the rest ventured to pass the door and to advance on tiptoe. This example was imitated by the rest, until the room filled silently, as if these men had been the humblest, most devoted courtiers. Far beyond the door the heads of those who were not able to enter could be seen, all craning to their utmost height to try and see. D'Artagnan saw it all through an opening he had made in the curtain, and in the very first man who entered he recognized Planchet. "Sir," said the queen to him, thinking he was the leader of the band, "you wished to see the king, and therefore I determined to show him to you myself. Approach and look at him, and say if we have the appearance of people who wish to run away." "No, certainly," replied Planchet, rather astonished at the unexpected honor conferred upon him. "You will say, then, to my good and faithful Parisians," continued Anne, with a smile, the expression of which did not deceive D'Artagnan, "that you have seen the king in bed, asleep, and the queen also ready to retire. I shall tell them, madame, and those who accompany me will say the same thing." But what?" asked Anne of Austria. "Will your majesty pardon me?" said Planchet. "But is it really the king who is lying there?" Anne of Austria started. "If," she said, "there is one among you who knows the king, let him approach and say whether it is really his majesty lying there." A man wrapped in a cloak, in the folds of which his face was hidden, approached and leaned over the bed and looked. For 1 second, D'Artagnan thought the man had some evil design, and he put his hand to his sword. But in the movement made by the man in stooping a portion of his face was uncovered, and D'Artagnan recognized the coadjutor. "It is certainly the king," said the man, rising again. "God bless his majesty." "Yes," repeated the leader in a whisper, "God bless his majesty." And all these men, who had entered enraged, passed from anger to pity and blessed the royal infant in their turn. "Now," said Planchet, "let us thank the queen. My friends, retire." They all bowed, and retired by degrees as noiselessly as they had entered. Planchet, who had been the first to enter, was the last to leave. The queen stopped him. "What is your name, my friend?" she said. Planchet, much surprised at the inquiry, turned back. "Yes," continued the queen, "I think myself as much honored to have received you this evening as if you had been a prince, and I wish to know your name." "Yes," thought Planchet, "to treat me as a prince. No, thank you." D'Artagnan trembled lest Planchet, seduced like the crow in the fable, should tell his name, and that the queen, knowing his name, would discover that Planchet had belonged to him. "Madame," replied Planchet respectfully, "I am called Delorier, at your service." "Thank you, Monsieur Delorier," said the queen. "And what is your business?" "Madame, I am a clothier in the Rue Bourdonnais." "That is all I wished to know," said the queen. "Much obliged to you, Monsieur Delorier. You will hear again from me." "Come, come," thought D'Artagnan, emerging from behind the curtain. "Decidedly Monsieur Planchet is no fool. It is evident he has been brought up in a good school." The different actors in the strange scene remained facing one another, without uttering a single word. The queen standing near the door, D'Artagnan half out of his hiding place, the king raised on his elbow, ready to fall down on his bed again at the slightest sound that would indicate the return of the multitude. But instead of approaching, the noise became more and more distant, and very soon it died entirely away. The queen breathed more freely. D'Artagnan wiped his damp forehead, and the king slid off his bed, saying, "Let us go." At this moment Laporte reappeared. "Well?" asked the queen. "Well, madame," replied the valet. "I followed them as far as the gates. They announced to all their comrades that they had seen the king, and that the queen had spoken to them, and, in fact, they went away quite proud and happy." "Oh, the miserable wretches!" murmured the queen. "They shall pay dearly for their boldness, and it is I who promised this." Then, turning to D'Artagnan, she said, "Sir, you have given me this evening the best advice I have ever received. Continue, and say what we must do now." "Monsieur Laporte," said D'Artagnan, "finish dressing his Majesty." "We may go, then?" asked the queen. "Whenever your Majesty pleases. You have only to descend by the private stairs, and you will find me at the door." "Go, sir," said the queen. "I will follow you." D'Artagnan went down and found the carriage at its post and the Musketeer on the box. D'Artagnan took out the parcel which he had desired Bernouin to place under the seat. It may be remembered that it was the hat and cloak belonging to Monsieur de Gondy's coachman. He placed the cloak on his shoulders and the hat on his head, whilst the Musketeer got off the box. "Sir," said D'Artagnan, "you will go and release your companion, who is guarding the coachman. You must mount your horse and proceed to the Rue Tiqueton, Hôtel de la Chevrette, whence you will take my horse and that of Monsieur du Vallon, which you must saddle and equip as if for war, and then you will leave Paris, bringing them with you to Cours-la-Reine. If, when you arrive at Cours-la-Reine, you find no one, you must go on to Saint-Germain, on the king's service." The Musketeer touched his cap and went away to execute the orders thus received. D'Artagnan mounted the box, having a pair of pistols in his belt, a musket under his feet, and a naked sword behind him. The queen appeared, and was followed by the king and the Duc d'Anjou, his brother. "Monsieur the coadjutor's carriage!" she exclaimed, falling back. "Yes, madame," said D'Artagnan. "But get in fearlessly, for I myself will drive you." The queen uttered a cry of surprise and entered the carriage, and the king and monsieur took their places at her side. "Come, Laporte," said the queen. "How, madame?" said the valet. "In the same carriage as your Majesty's? It is not a matter of royal etiquette this evening, but of the king's safety. Get in, Laporte." Laporte obeyed. "Pull down the blinds," said D'Artagnan. "But will that not excite suspicion, sir?" asked the queen. "Your Majesty's mind may be quite at ease," replied the officer. "I have my answer ready." The blinds were pulled down and they started at a gallop by the Rue Richelieu. On reaching the gate, the captain of the post advanced at the head of a dozen men, holding a lantern in his hand. D'Artagnan signed to them to draw near. "Do you recognize the carriage?" he asked the sergeant. "No," replied the latter. "Look at the arms." The sergeant put the lantern near the panel. "They are those of Monsieur le Coadjuteur," he said. "Hush! He is enjoying a ride with Madame de Guémeny." The sergeant began to laugh. "Open the gate," he cried. "I know who it is." Then, putting his face to the lowered blinds, he said, "I wish you joy, my lord." "Impudent fellow," cried D'Artagnan. "You will get me turned off." The gate groaned on its hinges, and D'Artagnan, seeing the way clear, whipped his horses, who started at a canter, and 5 minutes later they had rejoined the cardinal. "Mousqueton!" exclaimed D'Artagnan. "Draw up the blinds of his Majesty's carriage." "It is he!" cried Porthos. "Disguised as a coachman!" exclaimed Mazarin. "And driving the coadjutor's carriage," said the queen. "Corpo di Dio! Monsieur D'Artagnan," said Mazarin, "you are worth your weight in gold." Chapter 53. How D'Artagnan and Porthos earned by selling straw. Mazarin was desirous of setting out instantly for Saint-Germain, but the queen declared that she should wait for the people whom she had appointed to meet her. However, she offered the Cardinal Laporte's place, which he accepted and went from one carriage to the other. It was not without foundation that a report of the king's intention to leave Paris by night had been circulated. 10 or 12 persons had been in the secret since 6 o'clock, and howsoever great their prudence might be, they could not issue the necessary orders for the departure without suspicion being generated. Besides, each individual had 1 or 2 others for whom he was interested, and as there could be no doubt but that the queen was leaving Paris full of terrible projects of vengeance, everyone had warned parents and friends of what was about to transpire, so that the news of the approaching exit ran like a train of lighted gunpowder along the streets. The first carriage which arrived after that of the queen was that of the Prince de Condé, with the princess and dowager princess. Both these ladies had been awakened in the middle of the night and did not know what it all was about. The second contained the Duke and Duchess of Orleans, the tall young Mademoiselle and the Abbé de la Rivière, and the third, the Duc de Longueville and the Prince de Conti, brother and brother-in-law of Condé. They all alighted and hastened to pay their respects to the king and queen in their coach. The queen fixed her eyes upon the carriage they had left, and seeing that it was empty, she said, "But where is Madame de Longueville?" "Ah, yes, where's my sister?" asked the prince. "Madame de Longueville is ill," said the duke, "and she desired me to excuse her to your majesty," and gave a quick glance to Mazarin, who answered by an almost imperceptible shake of his head. "What do you say of this?" asked the queen. "I say that she is a hostage for the Parisians," answered the cardinal. "Why is she not come?" asked the prince in a low voice, addressing his brother. "Silence," whispered the duke. "She has her reasons." "She will ruin us," returned the prince. "She will save us," said Conti. Carriages now arrived in crowds. Those of the Marechal de Villeroy, Guitant, Villequier, and Comminges came into the line. The 2 Musketeers arrived in their turn, holding the horses of D'Artagnan and Porthos in their hands. These 2 instantly mounted, the coachman of the latter replacing D'Artagnan on the coach-box of the royal coach. Mousqueton took the place of the coachman, and drove standing, for reasons known to himself, like Automedon of antiquity. The queen, though occupied by 1,000 details, tried to catch the Gascon's eye, but he, with his wonted prudence, had mingled with the crowd. "Let us be the avant-garde," said he to Porthos, "and find good quarters at Saint-Germain. Nobody will think of us, and for my part one am greatly fatigued." "As for me," replied Porthos, "I am falling asleep, which is strange, considering we have not had any fighting. Truly the Parisians are idiots." "Or rather, we are very clever," said D'Artagnan. "Perhaps. And how is your wrist?" "Better. But do you think that we've got them this time?" "Got what? You your command, and I my title?" "I' faith, yes, I should expect so. Besides, if they forget, I shall take the liberty of reminding them." "The queen's voice." "She is speaking," said Porthos. "I think she wants to ride on horseback." "Oh, she would like it, but—" "But what?" "The cardinal won't allow it." "Gentlemen," he said, addressing the 2 Musketeers, "accompany the royal carriage, we are going forward to look for lodgings." D'Artagnan started off for Saint-Germain, followed by Porthos. "We will go on, gentlemen," said the queen, and the royal carriage drove on, followed by the other coaches and about 50 horsemen. They reached Saint-Germain without any accident. On descending, the queen found the prince awaiting her, bareheaded, to offer her his hand. "What an awakening for the Parisians!" said the queen, radiant. "It is war," said the prince. "Well, then, let it be war. Have we not on our side the conqueror of Rocroi, of Nordlingen, of Lens?" The prince bowed low. It was then 3 o'clock in the morning. The queen walked first, everyone followed her. About 200 persons had accompanied her in her flight. "Gentlemen," said the queen, laughing, "pray take up your abode in the chateau. It is large, and there will be no want of room for you all. But as we never thought of coming here, I am informed that there are, in all, only 3 beds in the whole establishment, 1 for the king, 1 for me, and 1 for the cardinal," muttered the prince. Am I, then, to sleep on the floor?" asked Gaston d'Orleans with a forced smile. "No, my prince," replied Mazarin. "The 3rd bed is intended for your highness." "But your eminence?" replied the prince. "I," answered Mazarin, "I shall not sleep at all. I have work to do." Gaston desired that he should be shown into the room wherein he was to sleep, without in the least concerning himself as to where his wife and daughter were to repose. "Well, for my part, I shall go to bed," said D'Artagnan. "Come, Porthos." Porthos followed the lieutenant with that profound confidence he ever had in the wisdom of his friend. They walked from one end of the chateau to the other, Porthos looking with wondering eyes at D'Artagnan, who was counting on his fingers. "400 at a pistole each, 400 pistoles." "Yes," interposed Porthos, 400 pistoles. "But who is to make 400 pistoles?" "A pistole is not enough," said D'Artagnan. "'Tis worth a louis." "What is worth a louis?" 400, at a louis each, make 400 louis. 400, said Porthos. "Yes, there are 200 of them, and each of them will need 2, which will make 400. But 400 what? Listen, cried D'Artagnan. But as there were all kinds of people about, who were in a state of stupefaction at the unexpected arrival of the court, he whispered in his friend's ear. I understand, answered Porthos. I understand you perfectly, on my honor. 200 louis each of us would be making a pretty thing of it, but what will people say? Let them say what they will. Besides, how will they know that we are doing it? But who will distribute these things? Asked Porthos. Isn't Musketeer there? But he wears my livery. My livery will be known, replied Porthos. He can turn his coat inside out. You are always in the right, my dear friend, cried Porthos. But where the devil do you discover all the notions you put into practice? D'Artagnan smiled. The two friends turned down the first street they came to. Porthos knocked at the door of a house to the right, whilst D'Artagnan knocked at the door of a house to the left. Some straw, they said. Sir, we don't keep any, was the reply of the people who opened the doors. But please ask at the hay dealer's. Where is the hay dealer's? At the last large door in the street. Are there any other people in Saint-Germain who sell straw? Yes. There's the landlord of the Lamb, and Gros Louis the farmer. They both live in the Rue de Ursulines. Very well. D'Artagnan went instantly to the hay dealer and bargained with him for 150 trusses of straw, which he obtained, at the rate of 3 pistoles each. He went afterward to the innkeeper and bought from him 200 trusses at the same price. Finally, Farmer Louis sold them 80 trusses, making in all 430. There was no more to be had in Saint-Germain. This foraging did not occupy more than half an hour. Musketeer, duly instructed, was put at the head of this sudden and new business. He was cautioned not to let a bit of straw out of his hands under a louis the truss, and they entrusted to him straw to the amount of 430 louis. D'Artagnan, taking with him 3 trusses of straw, returned to the chateau, where everybody, freezing with cold and more than half asleep, envied the king, the queen, and the Duke of Orleans on their camp beds. The lieutenant's entrance produced a burst of laughter in the great drawing-room. But he did not appear to notice that he was the object of general attention, but began to arrange, with so much cleverness, nicety, and gaiety, his straw bed, that the mouths of all these poor creatures, who could not go to sleep, began to water. Straw! They all cried out, Straw! Where is there any to be found? I can show you, answered the Gascon, and he conducted them to Musketeer, who freely distributed the trusses at the rate of a louis apiece. It was thought rather dear, but people wanted to sleep, and who would not give even 2 or 3 louis for a few hours of sound sleep? D'Artagnan gave up his bed to anyone who wanted it, making it over about a dozen times, and since he was supposed to have paid, like the others, a louis for his truss of straw, he pocketed in that way 30 louis in less than half an hour. At 5 o'clock in the morning the straw was worth 80 francs a truss, and there was no more to be had. D'Artagnan had taken the precaution to set apart 4 trusses for his own use. He put in his pocket the key of the room where he had hidden them, and accompanied by Porthos returned to settle with Musketeer, who, naively, and like the worthy steward that he was, handed them 430 louis and kept 100 for himself. Musketeer, who knew nothing of what was going on in the chateau, wondered that the idea had not occurred to him sooner. D'Artagnan put the gold in his hat, and in going back to the chateau settled the reckoning with Porthos. Each of them had cleared 215 louis. Porthos, however, found that he had no straw left for himself. He returned to Musketeer, but the steward had sold the last wisp. He then repaired to D'Artagnan, who, thanks to his 4 trusses of straw, was in the act of making up and tasting, by anticipation, the luxury of a bed so soft, so well stuffed at the head, so well covered at the foot, that it would have excited the envy of the king himself, if his majesty had not been fast asleep in his own. D'Artagnan could on no account consent to pull his bed to pieces again for Porthos, but for a consideration of 4 louis that the latter paid him for it, he consented that Porthos should share his couch with him. He laid his sword at the head, his pistols by his side, stretched his cloak over his feet, placed his felt hat on the top of his cloak, and extended himself luxuriously on the straw, which rustled under him. He was already enjoying the sweet dream engendered by the possession of 219 louis, made in a quarter of an hour, when a voice was heard at the door of the hall, which made him stir. "Monsieur d'Artagnan," it cried. "Here!" cried Porthos. "Here!" Porthos foresaw that if D'Artagnan was called away, he should remain the sole possessor of the bed. An officer approached. "I am come to fetch you, Monsieur d'Artagnan." "From whom?" "His Eminence sent me. Tell my lord that I'm going to sleep, and I advise him as a friend to do the same." "His Eminence is not gone to bed and will not go to bed, and wants you instantly." "The devil take Mazarin, who does not know when to sleep at the proper time. What does he want with me? Is it to make me a captain? In that case I will forgive him." And the Musketeer rose, grumbling, took his sword, hat, pistols, and cloak, and followed the officer, whilst Porthos, alone and sole possessor of the bed, endeavored to follow the good example of falling asleep, which his predecessor had set him. "Monsieur d'Artagnan," said the cardinal on perceiving him, "I have not forgotten with what zeal you have served me. I am going to prove to you that I have not." "Good," thought the Gascon. "This is a promising beginning. Monsieur d'Artagnan," he resumed, "do you wish to become a captain?" "Yes, my lord." "And your friend still longs to be made a baron?" "At this very moment, my lord. He no doubt dreams that he is one already." "Then," said Mazarin, taking from his portfolio the letter which he had already shown D'Artagnan, "take this dispatch and carry it to England." D'Artagnan looked at the envelope. There was no address on it. "Am I not to know to whom to present it?" "You will know when you reach London. At London you may tear off the outer envelope." "And what are my instructions?" "To obey in every particular the man to whom this letter is addressed. You must set out for Boulogne. At the Royal Arms of England you will find a young gentleman named Mordaunt." "Yes, my lord." "And what am I to do with this young gentleman?" "Follow wherever he leads you." D'Artagnan looked at the cardinal with a stupefied air. "There are your instructions," said Mazarin. "Go, go." "'Tis easy to say so, but that requires money, and I haven't any." "Ah," replied Mazarin, "so you have no money?" "None, my lord." "But the diamond I gave you yesterday?" "I wish to keep it in remembrance of your Eminence." Mazarin sighed. "'Tis very dear living in England, my lord, especially as envoy extraordinary." "Zounds," replied Mazarin. "The people there are very sedate, and their habits, since the Revolution, simple, but no matter." He opened a drawer and took out a purse. "What do you say to 1,000 crowns?" D'Artagnan pouted out his lower lip in a most extraordinary manner. "I reply, my lord, 'tis but little, as certainly I shall not go alone." "I suppose not. Monsieur du Vallon, that worthy gentleman. For, with the exception of yourself, Monsieur d'Artagnan, there's not a man in France that I esteem and love so much as him." "Then, my lord," replied D'Artagnan, pointing to the purse which Mazarin still held, "if you love and esteem him so much, you understand me? Be it so. On his account I add 200 crowns." "Scoundrel!" muttered D'Artagnan. "But on our return," he said aloud, "may we, that is, my friend and I, depend on having he his barony and I my promotion?" "On the honor of Mazarin." "I should like another sort of oath better," said D'Artagnan to himself. Then aloud, "May I not offer my duty to Her Majesty the Queen?" "Her Majesty is asleep, and you must set off directly," replied Mazarin. "Go, pray, sir." "One word more, my lord. If there's any fighting where I'm going, must I fight? You are to obey the commands of the personage to whom I have addressed the enclosed letter." "'Tis well," said D'Artagnan, holding out his hand to receive the money. "I offer my best respects and services to you, my lord." D'Artagnan then, returning to the officer, said, "Sir, have the kindness also to awaken Monsieur du Vallon and to say, 'Tis by his Eminence's order, and that I shall await him at the stables." The officer went off with an eagerness that showed the Gascon that he had some personal interest in the matter. Porthos was snoring most musically when someone touched him on the shoulder. "I come from the cardinal," said the officer. "Hey go," said Porthos, opening his large eyes. What have you got to say? That His Eminence has ordered you to England, and that Monsieur d'Artagnan is waiting for you in the stables." Porthos sighed heavily, arose, took his hat, his pistols, and his cloak, and departed, casting a look of regret upon the couch where he had hoped to sleep so well. No sooner had he turned his back than the officer laid himself down in it, and he had scarcely crossed the threshold before his successor, in his turn, was snoring immoderately. It was very natural, he being the only person in the whole assemblage except the king, the queen, and the Duke of Orleans who slept gratuitously. Chapter 54, in which we hear tidings of Aramis. D'Artagnan went straight to the stables. Day was just dawning. He found his horse and that of Porthos fastened to the manger, but to an empty manger. He took pity on these poor animals and went to a corner of the stable, where he saw a little straw, but in doing so he struck his foot against a human body, which uttered a cry and arose on its knees, rubbing its eyes. It was Musketeer, who, having no straw to lie upon, had helped himself to that of the horses. "Musketeer," cried D'Artagnan, "let us be off. Let us set off." Musketeer, recognizing the voice of his master's friend, got up suddenly, and in doing so let fall some louis which he had appropriated to himself illegally during the night. "Ho! Ho!" exclaimed D'Artagnan, picking up a louis and displaying it. "Here's a louis that smells confoundedly of straw." Musketeer blushed so confusedly that the Gascon began to laugh at him and said, "Porthos would be angry, my dear Monsieur Musketeer, but I pardon you. Only let us remember that this gold must serve us as a joke. So be gay, come along." Musketeer instantly assumed a jovial countenance, saddled the horses quickly and mounted his own without making faces over it. Whilst this went on, Porthos arrived with a very cross look on his face, and was astonished to find the lieutenant resigned and Musketeer almost merry. "Ah, that's it," he cried. "You have your promotion and I my barony. We are going to fetch our brevets," said D'Artagnan. "And when we come back, Master Mazarin will sign them." "And where are we going?" asked Porthos. "To Paris first. I have affairs to settle." And they both set out for Paris. On arriving at its gates, they were astounded to see the threatening aspect of the capital. Around a broken-down carriage the people were uttering imprecations, whilst the persons who had attempted to escape were made prisoners, that is to say, an old man and 2 women. On the other hand, as the 2 friends approached to enter, they showed them every kind of civility, thinking them deserters from the royal party and wishing to bind them to their own. "What is the king doing?" they asked. "He is asleep." "And the Spanish woman?" "Dreaming." "And the cursed Italian?" "He is awake, so keep on the watch as they are gone away. It's for some purpose, rely on it. But as you are the strongest, after all," continued D'Artagnan, "don't be furious with old men and women, and keep your wrath for more appropriate occasions." The people listened to these words and let go the ladies, who thanked D'Artagnan with an eloquent look. "Now, onward!" cried the Gascon, and they continued their way, crossing the barricades, getting the chains about their legs, pushed about, questioning and questioned. In the place of the Palais Royal D'Artagnan saw a sergeant, who was drilling 600 or 700 citizens. It was Planchet, who brought into play profitably the recollections of the regiment of Piedmont. In passing before D'Artagnan he recognized his former master. "Good day, Monsieur d'Artagnan," said Planchet proudly. "Good day, Monsieur de Laurier," replied D'Artagnan. Planchet stopped short, staring at D'Artagnan. The first row, seeing their sergeant stopped in their turn, and so on to the very last. "These citizens are dreadfully ridiculous," observed D'Artagnan to Porthos, and went on his way. 5 minutes afterward he entered the hotel of La Chevrette, where pretty Madeleine, the hostess, came to him. "My dear Mistress Turquaine," said the Gascon, "if you happen to have any money, lock it up quickly. If you happen to have any jewels, hide them directly. If you happen to have any debtors, make them pay you, or any creditors don't pay them." "Why, prithee?" asked Madeleine. "Because Paris is going to be reduced to dust and ashes like Babylon, of which you have no doubt heard tell." "And are you going to leave me at such a time?" "This very instant." "And where are you going?" "Ah, if you could tell me that, you would be doing me a service. Ah me! Ah me! Have you any letters for me? Inquired D'Artagnan, wishing to signify to the hostess that her lamentations were superfluous, and that therefore she had better spare him demonstrations of her grief. There's one just arrived, and she handed the letter to D'Artagnan. From Athos, cried D'Artagnan, recognizing the handwriting. Ah, said Porthos, let us hear what he says. D'Artagnan opened the letter and read as follows. Dear D'Artagnan, dear Du Vallon, my good friends, perhaps this may be the last time that you will ever hear from me. Aramis and I are very unhappy, but God, our courage, and the remembrance of our friendship sustain us. Think often of Raoul. I entrust to you certain papers which are at Blois, and in 2 months and a half, if you do not hear of us, take possession of them. Embrace, with all your heart, the Vicomte, for your devoted friend, Athos. I believe, by heaven, said D'Artagnan, that I shall embrace him, since he's upon our road, and if he is so unfortunate as to lose our dear Athos, from that very day he becomes my son. And I, said Porthos, shall make him my sole heir. Let us see, what more does Athos say? Should you meet on your journey a certain Monsieur Mordaunt, distrust him. In a letter I cannot say more. Monsieur Mordaunt, exclaimed the Gascon, surprised. Monsieur Mordaunt. 'Tis well, said Porthos. We shall remember that. But see, there is a postscript from Aramis. So there is, said D'Artagnan, and he read, We conceal the place where we are, dear friends, knowing your brotherly affection, and that you would come and die with us were we to reveal it. Confound it, interrupted Porthos, with an explosion of passion which sent Mousqueton to the other end of the room. Are they in danger of dying? D'Artagnan continued, Athos bequeaths to you Raoul, and I bequeath to you my revenge. If by any good luck you lay your hand on a certain man named Mordaunt, tell Porthos to take him into a corner and to wring his neck. I dare not say more in a letter. Aramis. If that is all, it is easily done, said Porthos. On the contrary, observed D'Artagnan with a vexed look, it would be impossible. How so? It is precisely this Monsieur Mordaunt whom we are going to join at Boulogne, and with whom we cross to England. Well, suppose instead of joining this Monsieur Mordaunt we were to go and join our friends? Said Porthos, with a gesture fierce enough to have frightened an army. I did think of it, but this letter has neither date nor postmark. True, said Porthos, and he began to wander about the room like a man beside himself, gesticulating and half drawing his sword out of the scabbard. As to D'Artagnan, he remained standing like a man in consternation, with the deepest affliction depicted on his face. Ah, this is not right. Athos insults us. He wishes to die alone. It is bad, bad, bad. Mousqueton, witnessing this despair, melted into tears in a corner of the room. Come, said D'Artagnan. All this leads to nothing. Let us go on. We will embrace Raoul, and perhaps he will have news of Athos. Stop, an idea, cried Porthos. Indeed, my dear D'Artagnan, I don't know how you manage, but you are always full of ideas. Let us go and embrace Raoul. Woe to that man who should happen to contradict my master at this moment, said Mousqueton to himself. I wouldn't give a farthing for his life. They set out. On arriving at the Rue Saint-Denis, the friends found a vast concourse of people. It was the Duc de Beaufort, who was coming from the Vendemois and whom the coadjutor was showing to the Parisians, intoxicated with joy. With the Duke's aid they already considered themselves invincible. The two friends turned off into a side street to avoid meeting the prince, and so reached the Saint-Denis gate. Is it true, said the guard to the two cavaliers, that the Duc de Beaufort has arrived in Paris? Nothing more certain, and the best proof of it is, said D'Artagnan, that he has dispatched us to meet the Duc de Vendôme, his father, who is coming in his turn. Long live de Beaufort, cried the guards, and they drew back respectfully to let the two friends pass. Once across the barriers these two knew neither fatigue nor fear. Their horses flew, and they never ceased speaking of Athos and Aramis. The camp had entered Saint-Omer. The friends made a little detour and went to the camp, and gave the army an exact account of the flight of the king and queen. They found Raoul near his tent, reclining on a truss of hay, of which his horse stole some mouthfuls. The young man's eyes were red and he seemed dejected. The Marechal de Gramont and the Comte de Guiche had returned to Paris and he was quite lonely. And as soon as he saw the two cavaliers, he ran to them with open arms. "Oh, is it you, dear friends? Did you come here to fetch me? Will you take me away with you? Do you bring me tidings of my guardian? Have you not received any?" said D'Artagnan to the youth. "Alas, sir, no, and I do not know what has become of him, so that I am really so unhappy that I weep." In fact, tears rolled down his cheeks. Porthos turned aside, in order not to show by his honest round face what was passing in his mind. "Deuce take it!" cried D'Artagnan, more moved than he had been for a long time. "Don't despair, my friend. If you have not received any letters from the Count, we have received one." "Oh, really?" cried Raoul. "And a comforting one, too," added D'Artagnan, seeing the delight that his intelligence gave the young man. "Have you it?" asked Raoul. "Yes, that is, I had it," repined the Gascon, making believe to find it. "Wait, it ought to be there in my pocket. It speaks of his return, does it not, Porthos?" All Gascon as he was, D'Artagnan could not bear alone the weight of that falsehood. "Yes," replied Porthos, coughing. Give it to me," said the young man. I read it a little while since. Can I have lost it? Ah, confound it. Yes, my pocket has a hole in it." "Oh, yes, Monsieur Raoul," said Musketeer. "The letter was very consoling. These gentlemen read it to me, and I wept for joy. But at any rate, you know where he is, Monsieur d'Artagnan?" asked Raoul, somewhat comforted. "Ah, that's the thing," replied the Gascon. "Undoubtedly I know it, but it is a mystery. Not to me, I hope?" "No, not to you, so I am going to tell you where he is." Porthos devoured D'Artagnan with wondering eyes. "Where the devil shall I say that he is, so that he cannot try to rejoin him?" thought D'Artagnan. "Well, where is he, sir?" asked Raoul in a soft and coaxing voice. "He is at Constantinople." "Among the Turks?" exclaimed Raoul, alarmed. "Good heavens! How can you tell me that? Does that alarm you?" cried D'Artagnan. "Pooh! What are the Turks to such men as the Comte de la Fere and the Abbé d'Herblay?" "Ah, his friend is with him?" said Raoul. "That comforts me a little. Has he wit or not, this demon D'Artagnan?" said Porthos, astonished at his friend's deception. "Now, sir," said D'Artagnan, wishing to change the conversation, "here are 50 pistoles that the Count has sent you by the same courier. I suppose you have no more money and that they will be welcome." "I have still 20 pistoles, sir." "Well, take them. That makes 70. "And if you wish for more," said Porthos, putting his hand to his pocket. "Thank you, sir," replied Raoul, blushing. "Thank you 1,000 times." At this moment Olivain appeared. "Apropos," said D'Artagnan, loud enough for the servant to hear him, "are you satisfied with Olivain?" "Yes, in some respects, tolerably well." Olivain pretended to have heard nothing and entered the tent. "What fault do you find with the fellow?" "He is a glutton." "Oh, sir!" cried Olivain, reappearing at this accusation. "And a little bit of a thief." "Oh, sir!" "Oh! And, more especially, a notorious coward." Oh, sir! You really vilify me," cried Olivain. "The deuce!" cried D'Artagnan. "Pray learn, Monsieur Olivain, that people like us are not to be served by cowards. Rob your master, eat his sweetmeats, and drink his wine. But, by Jove, don't be a coward, or I shall cut off your ears. Look at Monsieur Mouston. See the honorable wounds he has received. Observe how his habitual valor has given dignity to his countenance." Musketeer was in the third heaven and would have embraced D'Artagnan had he dared. Meanwhile he resolved to sacrifice his life for him on the next occasion that presented itself. "Send away that fellow, Raoul," said the Gascon. "For if he's a coward he will disgrace thee some day." "Monsieur says I am coward," cried Olivain, "because he wanted the other day to fight a cornet in Gramont's regiment, and I refused to accompany him." "Monsieur Olivain, a lackey ought never to disobey," said D'Artagnan sternly. Then taking him aside, he whispered to him, "Thou hast done right. thy master was in the wrong. Here's a crown for thee, but should he ever be insulted and thou dost not let thyself be cut in quarters for him, I will cut out thy tongue. Remember that." Olivain bowed and slipped the crown into his pocket. "And now, Raoul," said the Gascon, "Monsieur du Vallon and I are going away as ambassadors, where, I know not, but should you want anything, write to Madame Turquaine at La Chevrette, Rue Tiqueton, and draw upon her purse as on a banker with economy, for it is not so well filled as that of Monsieur d'Emery." And having, meantime, embraced his ward, he passed him into the robust arms of Porthos, who lifted him up from the ground and held him a moment suspended near the noble heart of the formidable giant. "Come," said D'Artagnan, "let us go." And they set out for Boulogne, where toward evening they arrived, their horses flecked with foam and dark with perspiration. At 10 steps from the place where they halted was a young man in black, who seemed waiting for someone, and who, from the moment he saw them enter the town, never took his eyes off them. D'Artagnan approached him, and seeing him stare so fixedly, said, "Well, friend, I don't like people to quiz me." "Sir," said the young man, "do you not come from Paris, if you please?" D'Artagnan thought it was some gossip who wanted news from the capital. "Yes, sir," he said in a softened tone. "Are you not going to put up at the Arms of England?" "Yes, sir." "Are you not charged with a mission from His Eminence, Cardinal Mazarin?" "Yes, sir." "In that case, I am the man you have to do with. I am M. Mordaunt." "Ah," thought D'Artagnan, "the man I am warned against by Athos." "Ah," thought Porthos, "the man Aramis wants me to strangle." They both looked searchingly at the young man, who misunderstood the meaning of that inquisition. "Do you doubt my word?" he said. "In that case I can give you proofs." "No, sir," said D'Artagnan, "and we place ourselves at your orders." "Well, gentlemen," resumed Mordaunt, "we must set out without delay. Today is the last day granted me by the cardinal. My ship is ready, and had you not come I must have set off without you, for General Cromwell expects my return impatiently." "So," thought the lieutenant, "'tis to General Cromwell that our dispatches are addressed." "Have you no letter for him?" asked the young man. "I have one, the seal of which I am not to break till I reach London. But since you tell me to whom it is addressed, 'tis useless to wait till then." D'Artagnan tore open the envelope of the letter. It was directed to Monsieur Oliver Cromwell, General of the Army of the English nation. "Ah," said D'Artagnan, "a singular commission." "Who is this Monsieur Oliver Cromwell?" inquired Porthos. "Formerly a brewer," replied the Gascon. "Perhaps Mazarin wishes to make a speculation in beer, as we did in straw," said Porthos. "Come, come, gentlemen," said Mordaunt, impatiently. "Let us depart." "What?" exclaimed Porthos without supper. "Cannot Monsieur Cromwell wait a little?" "Yes, but I—" said Mordaunt. "Well, you," said Porthos. "What then?" "I cannot wait." "Oh, as to you, that is not my concern, and I shall sup either with or without your permission." The young man's eyes kindled in secret, but he restrained himself. "Monsieur," said D'Artagnan, "you must excuse famished travelers. Besides, our supper can't delay you much. We will hasten on to the inn. You will meanwhile proceed on foot to the harbor. We will take a bite and shall be there as soon as you are." "Just as you please, gentlemen, provided we set sail," he said. "The name of your ship?" inquired D'Artagnan. "The Standard." "Very well. In half an hour we shall be on board." And the friends, spurring on their horses, rode to the hotel, the Arms of England. "What do you say of that young man?" asked D'Artagnan as they hurried along. "I say that he doesn't suit me at all," said Porthos, "and that I feel a strong itching to follow Aramis's advice." "By no means, my dear Porthos. That man is a messenger of General Cromwell. It would ensure for us a poor reception, I imagine, should it be announced to him that we had twisted the neck of his confidant." "Nevertheless," said Porthos, "I have always noticed that Aramis gives good advice." "Listen," returned D'Artagnan, "when our embassy is finished." "Well, if it brings us back to France." "Well, we shall see." At that moment the two friends reached the hotel, Arms of England, where they supped with hearty appetite and then at once proceeded to the port. There they found a brig ready to set sail, upon the deck of which they recognized Mordaunt walking up and down impatiently. "It is singular," said D'Artagnan, whilst the boat was taking them to the Standard. "It is astonishing how that young man resembles someone I must have known, but who it was I cannot yet remember." A few minutes later they were on board, but the embarkation of the horses was a longer matter than that of the men, and it was 8 o'clock before they raised anchor. The young man stamped impatiently and ordered all sail to be spread. Porthos, completely used up by 3 nights without sleep and a journey of 70 leagues on horseback, retired to his cabin and went to sleep. D'Artagnan, overcoming his repugnance to Mordaunt, walked with him upon the deck and invented 100 stories to make him talk. Mousqueton was seasick. Chapter 55. The Scotchman. And now our readers must leave the Standard to sail peaceably, not toward London, where D'Artagnan and Porthos believed they were going, but to Durham, whither Mordaunt had been ordered to repair by the letter he had received during his sojourn at Boulogne, and accompany us to the Royalist camp on this side of the Tyne near Newcastle. There, placed between 2 rivers on the borders of Scotland, but still on English soil, the tents of a little army extended. It was midnight. Some Highlanders were listlessly keeping watch. The moon, which was partially obscured by heavy clouds, now and then lit up the muskets of the sentinels, or silvered the walls, the roofs, and the spires of the town that Charles I had just surrendered to the parliamentary troops, whilst Oxford and Newark still held out for him in the hopes of coming to some arrangement. At one of the extremities of the camp, near an immense tent, in which the Scottish officers were holding a kind of council, presided over by Lord Lavin, their commander, a man attired as a cavalier lay sleeping on the turf, his right hand extended over his sword. About 50 paces off, another man, also apparelled as a cavalier, was talking to a Scotch sentinel, and, though a foreigner, he seemed to understand without much difficulty the answers given in the broad Perthshire dialect. As the town clock of Newcastle struck 1, the sleeper awoke, and with all the gestures of a man rousing himself out of deep sleep, he looked attentively about him. Perceiving that he was alone, he rose and, making a little circuit, passed close to the cavalier who was speaking to the sentinel. The former had no doubt finished his questions, for a moment later he said good night and carelessly followed the same path taken by the first cavalier. In the shadow of a tent the former was awaiting him. "Well, my dear friend?" said he, in as pure French as has ever been uttered between Rouen and Tours. "Well, my friend, there is not a moment to lose. We must let the king know immediately." "Why, what is the matter?" "It would take too long to tell you. Besides, you will hear it all directly, and the least word dropped here might ruin all. We must go and find Lord Winter." They both set off to the other end of the camp, but as it did not cover more than a surface of 500 feet, they quickly arrived at the tent they were looking for. "Tony, is your master sleeping?" said one of the 2 cavaliers to a servant who was lying in the outer compartment, which served as a kind of anteroom. "No, Monsieur le Comte," answered the servant. "I think not, or at least he has not long been so, for he was pacing up and down for more than 2 hours after he left the king, and the sound of his footsteps has only ceased during the last 10 minutes. However, you may look and see," added the lackey, raising the curtained entrance of the tent. Lord Winter was seated near an aperture, arranged as a window to let in the night air, his eyes mechanically following the course of the moon, intermittently veiled, as we before observed, by heavy clouds. The 2 friends approached Winter, who, with his head on his hands, was gazing at the heavens. He did not hear them enter and remained in the same attitude till he felt a hand upon his shoulder. He turned around, recognized Athos and Aramis, and held out his hand to them. "Have you observed," said he to them, "what a blood-red color the moon has tonight?" "No," replied Athos. "I thought it looked much the same as usual." "Look again, Chevalier," returned Lord Winter. "I must own," said Aramis, "I am like the Comte de la Fere. I can see nothing remarkable about it." "My lord," said Athos, "in a position so precarious as ours we must examine the earth and not the heavens. Have you studied our Scotch troops, and have you confidence in them?" "The Scotch?" inquired Winter. "What Scotch?" "Ours, egad!" exclaimed Athos. "Those in whom the king has confided, Lord Lavin's Highlanders." No, said Winter, then he paused. But tell me, can you not perceive the russet tint which marks the heavens? Not the least in the world, said Aramis and Athos at once. Tell me, continued Winter, always possessed by the same idea, is there not a tradition in France that Henry IV, the evening before the day he was assassinated, when he was playing at chess with M. de Bassompierre, saw clots of blood upon the chessboard? Yes, said Athos, and the Marechal has often told me so himself. Then it was so, murmured Winter, and the next day Henry IV was killed. But what has this vision of Henry IV to do with you, my lord? Inquired Aramis. Nothing, and indeed I am mad to trouble you with such things, when your coming to my tent at such an hour announces that you are the bearers of important news. Yes, my lord, said Athos. I wish to speak to the king. To the king, but the king is asleep. I have something important to reveal to him. Can it not be put off till tomorrow? He must know it this moment, and perhaps it is already too late. Come then, said Lord Winter. Lord Winter's tent was pitched by the side of the royal marquee, a kind of corridor communicating between the two. This corridor was guarded, not by a sentinel, but by a confidential servant, through whom, in case of urgency, Charles could communicate instantly with his faithful subject. These gentlemen are with me, said Winter. The lackey bowed and let them pass. As he had said, on a camp bed, dressed in his black doublet, booted, unbelted, with his felt hat beside him, lay the king, overcome by sleep and fatigue. They advanced, and Athos, who was the first to enter, gazed a moment in silence on that pale and noble face, framed in its long and now untidy matted hair, the blue veins showing through the transparent temples, his eyes seemingly swollen by tears. Athos sighed deeply. The sigh woke the king, so lightly did he sleep. He opened his eyes. Ah, said he, raising himself on his elbow. Is it you, Comte de la Fere? Yes, sire, replied Athos. You watch while I sleep, and you have come to bring me some news? Alas, sire, answered Athos. Your Majesty has guessed aright. It is bad news? Yes, sire. Never mind, the messenger is welcome. You never come to me without conferring pleasure. You whose devotion recognizes neither country nor misfortune, you who are sent to me by Henrietta, whatever news you bring, speak out. Sire, Cromwell has arrived this night at Newcastle. Ah! Exclaimed the king. To fight? No, sire, but to buy your Majesty. What did you say? I said, sire, that £400,000 are owing to the Scottish army. For unpaid wages, yes, I know it. For the last year my faithful Highlanders have fought for honor alone. Athos smiled. Well, sir, though honor is a fine thing, they are tired of fighting for it, and tonight they have sold you for £200,000. That is to say, for half what is owing them. Impossible, cried the king. The Scotch sell their king for £200,000. And who is the Judas who has concluded this infamous bargain? Lord Laven. Are you certain of it, sir? I heard it with my own ears. The king sighed deeply, as if his heart would break, and then buried his face in his hands. Oh, the Scotch, he exclaimed. The Scotch I called my faithful, to whom I trusted myself when I could have fled to Oxford. The Scotch, my brothers. But are you well assured, sir? Lying behind the tent of Lord Laven, I raised it and saw all, heard all. And when is this to be consummated? Today, this morning. So your Majesty must perceive there is no time to lose. To do what, since you say I am sold? To cross the Tyne, reach Scotland and rejoin Lord Montrose, who will not sell you. And what shall I do in Scotland? A war of partisans, unworthy of a king. The example of Robert Bruce will absolve you, sire. No, no, I have fought too long. They have sold me, they shall give me up, and the eternal shame of treble treason shall fall on their heads. Sire, said Athos, perhaps a king should act thus, but not a husband and a father. I have come in the name of your wife and daughter and of the children you have still in London, and I say to you, live, sire, it is the will of heaven. The king raised himself, buckled on his belt, and passing his handkerchief over his moist forehead, said, "Well, what is to be done? Sire, have you in the army one regiment on which you can implicitly rely?" "Winter," said the king, "do you believe in the fidelity of yours?" "Sire, they are but men, and men are become both weak and wicked. I will not answer for them. I would confide my life to them, but I should hesitate ere I trusted them with your majesties." "Well," said Athos, "since you have not a regiment, we are 3 devoted men. It is enough. Let your majesty mount on horseback and place yourself in the midst of us. We will cross the Tyne, reach Scotland, and you will be saved." "Is this your counsel also, Winter?" inquired the king. "Yes, sire." "And yours, Monsieur d'Herblay?" "Yes, sire." "As you wish, then. Winter, give the necessary orders." Winter then left the tent. In the meantime the king finished his toilet. The first rays of daybreak penetrated the aperture of the tent as Winter re-entered it. "All is ready, sire," said he. "For us also?" inquired Athos. "Grimaud and Blaisois are holding your horses, ready saddled." "In that case," exclaimed Athos, "let us not lose an instant, but set off." "Come," added the king. "Sire," said Aramis, "will not your majesty acquaint some of your friends of this?" "Friends," answered Charles sadly. "I have but 3, one of 20 years, who has never forgotten me, and 2 of a week's standing, whom I shall never forget. Come, gentlemen, come." The king quitted his tent and found his horse ready waiting for him. It was a chestnut that the king had ridden for 3 years, and of which he was very fond. The horse neighed with pleasure at seeing him. "Ah," said the king, "I was unjust. Here is a creature that loves me. You at least will be faithful to me, Arthur." The horse, as if it understood these words, bent its red nostrils toward the king's face, and parting his lips displayed all its teeth, as if with pleasure. "Yes, yes," said the king, caressing it with his hand. "Yes, my Arthur, thou art a fond and faithful creature." After this little scene Charles threw himself into the saddle, and turning to Athos, Aramis, and Winter, said, "Now, gentlemen, I am at your service." But Athos was standing with his eyes fixed on a black line which bordered the banks of the Tyne and seemed to extend double the length of the camp. "What is that line?" cried Athos, whose vision was still rather obscured by the uncertain shades and demi-tints of daybreak. "What is that line? I did not observe it yesterday." "It must be the fog rising from the river," said the king. "Sire, it is something more opaque than the fog." "Indeed," said Winter. "It appears to me like a bar of red color. It is the enemy, who have made a sortie from Newcastle and are surrounding us," exclaimed Athos. "The enemy!" cried the king. "Yes, the enemy. It is too late. Stop a moment. Does not that sunbeam yonder, just by the side of the town, glitter on the Ironsides?" This was the name given the cuirassiers, whom Cromwell had made his bodyguard. "Ah," said the king, "we shall soon see whether my Highlanders have betrayed me or not." "What are you going to do?" exclaimed Athos. "To give them the order to charge, and run down these miserable rebels." And the king, putting spurs to his horse, set off to the tent of Lord Laven. "Follow him," said Athos. "Come!" exclaimed Aramis. "Is the king wounded?" cried Lord Winter. "I see spots of blood on the ground." And he set off to follow the 2 friends. He was stopped by Athos. "Go and call out your regiment," said he. "I can foresee that we shall have need of it directly." Winter turned his horse, and the 2 friends rode on. It had taken but 2 minutes for the king to reach the tent of the Scottish commander. He dismounted and entered. The general was there, surrounded by the more prominent chiefs. "The king!" they exclaimed, as all rose in bewilderment. Charles was indeed in the midst of them, his hat on his head, his brows bent, striking his boot with his riding whip. "Yes, gentlemen, the king in person, the king who has come to ask for some account of what has happened." "What is the matter, sire?" exclaimed Lord Laven. "It is this, sir," said the king angrily, "that General Cromwell has reached Newcastle, that you knew it and I was not informed of it. that the enemy have left the town and are now closing the passages of the Tyne against us, that our sentinels have seen this movement and I have been left unacquainted with it, that, by an infamous treaty you have sold me for £200,000 to Parliament. Of this treaty, at least, I have been warned. This is the matter, gentlemen. Answer and exculpate yourselves, for I stand here to accuse you. Sire, said Lord Laven with hesitation. Sire, your Majesty has been deceived by false reports. My own eyes have seen the enemy extend itself between myself and Scotland, and I can almost say that with my own ears I have heard the clauses of the treaty debated. The Scotch chieftains looked at each other in their turn with frowning brows. Sire, murmured Lord Laven, crushed by shame. Sire, we are ready to give you every proof of our fidelity. I ask but one, said the king. Put the army in battle array and face the enemy. That cannot be, sire, said the earl. How cannot be? What hinders it? Exclaimed the king. Your Majesty is well aware that there is a truce between us and the English army. And if there is a truce, the English army has broken it by quitting the town, contrary to the agreement which kept it there. Now, I tell you, you must pass with me through this army across to Scotland, and if you refuse you may choose betwixt two names, which the contempt of all honest men will brand you with. You are either cowards or traitors. The eyes of the Scotch flashed fire, and, as often happens on such occasions, from shame they passed to effrontery, and two heads of clans advanced upon the king. Yes, said they, we have promised to deliver Scotland and England from him, who for the last 25 years has sucked the blood and gold of Scotland and England. We have promised, and we will keep our promise. Charles Stuart, you are our prisoner. And both extended their hands as if to seize the king, but before they could touch him with the tips of their fingers, both had fallen, one dead, the other stunned. Aramis had passed his sword through the body of the first, and Athos had knocked down the other with the butt end of his pistol. Then, as Lord Laven and the other chieftains recoiled before this unexpected rescue, which seemed to come from heaven for the prince they already thought was their prisoner, Athos and Aramis dragged the king from the perjured assembly into which he had so imprudently ventured, and throwing themselves on horseback all three returned at full gallop to the royal tent. On their road they perceived Lord Winter marching at the head of his regiment. The king motioned him to accompany them. Chapter 56. The Avenger. They all four entered the tent. They had no plan ready, they must think of one. The king threw himself into an armchair. I am lost, said he. No, sire, replied Athos. You are only betrayed. The king sighed deeply. Betrayed? Yes, betrayed by the Scotch, amongst whom I was born, whom I have always loved better than the English. Oh, traitors that ye are! Sire, said Athos, this is not a moment for recrimination, but a time to show yourself a king and a gentleman. Up, sire, up, for you have here at least 3 men who will not betray you. Ah, if we had been 5, murmured Athos, thinking of D'Artagnan and Porthos. What do you say? Inquired Charles, rising. I say, sire, that there is now but one way open. Lord Winter answers for his regiment, or at least very nearly so. We will not split straws about words. Let him place himself at the head of his men. We will place ourselves at the side of your Majesty, and we will mow a swath through Cromwell's army and reach Scotland. There is another method, said Aramis. Let one of us put on the dress and mount the king's horse. Whilst they pursue him, the king might escape. It is good advice, said Athos. And if the king will do one of us the honor, we shall be truly grateful to him. What do you think of this counsel, Winter? Asked the king, looking with admiration at these 2 men, whose chief idea seemed to be how they could take on their shoulders all the dangers that assailed him. I think the only chance of saving your Majesty has just been proposed by Monsieur d'Herblay. I humbly entreat your Majesty to choose quickly, for we have not an instant to lose. But if I accept, it is death, or at least imprisonment, for him who takes my place. He will have had the glory of having saved his king, cried Winter. The king looked at his old friend with tears in his eyes, undid the order of the Saint-Esprit which he wore, to honor the 2 Frenchmen who were with him, and passed it around Winter's neck, who received on his knees the striking proof of his sovereign's confidence and friendship. "It is right," said Athos. "He has served your majesty longer than we have." The king overheard these words and turned around with tears in his eyes. "Wait a moment, sir," said he. "I have an order for each of you also." He turned to a closet where his own orders were locked up and took out 2 ribbons of the Order of the Garter. "These cannot be for us," said Athos. "Why not, sir?" asked Charles. "Such are for royalty, and we are simple commoners. Speak not of crowns. I shall not find amongst them such great hearts as yours. No, no, you do yourselves injustice. But I am here to do you justice. On your knees, Count." Athos knelt down, and the king passed the ribbon down from left to right as usual, raised his sword, and instead of pronouncing the customary formula, "I make you a knight. Be brave, faithful, and loyal," he said. "You are brave, faithful, and loyal. I knight you, Monsieur le Comte." Then turning to Aramis, he said, "It is now your turn, Monsieur le Chevalier." The same ceremony recommenced, with the same words, whilst Winter unlaced his leather cuirass, that he might disguise himself like the king. Charles, having proceeded with Aramis as with Athos, embraced them both. "Sire," said Winter, who in this trying emergency felt all his strength and energy fire up, "we are ready." The king looked at the 3 gentlemen. "Then we must fly," said he. "Flying through an army, sire," said Athos, "in all countries in the world is called charging." "Then I shall die sword in hand," said Charles. "Monsieur le Comte, Monsieur le Chevalier, if ever I am king." "Sire, you have already done us more honor than simple gentlemen could ever aspire to. Therefore gratitude is on our side. But we must not lose time. We have already wasted too much." The king again shook hands with all 3, exchanged hats with Winter, and went out. Winter's regiment was ranged on some high ground above the camp. The king, followed by the 3 friends, turned his steps that way. The Scotch camp seemed as if at last awakened. The soldiers had come out of their tents and taken up their station in battle array. "Do you see that?" said the king. "Perhaps they are penitent and preparing to march." "If they are penitent," said Athos, "let them follow us." "Well," said the king, "what shall we do?" "Let us examine the enemy's army." At the same instant the eyes of the little group were fixed on the same line which at daybreak they had mistaken for fog, and which the morning sun now plainly showed was an army in order of battle. The air was soft and clear, as it generally is at that early hour of the morning. The regiments, the standards, and even the colors of the horses and uniforms were now clearly distinct. On the summit of a rising ground, a little in advance of the enemy, appeared a short and heavy-looking man. This man was surrounded by officers. He turned a spyglass toward the little group amongst which the king stood. "Does this man know your majesty personally?" inquired Aramis. Charles smiled. "That man is Cromwell," said he. "Then draw down your hat, sire, that he may not discover the substitution." "Ah," said Athos, "how much time we have lost." "Now," said the king, "give the word and let us start." "Will you not give it, sire?" asked Athos. "No, I make you my lieutenant general," said the king. "Listen, then, Lord Winter. Proceed, sire, I beg. What we are going to say does not concern your majesty." The king, smiling, turned a few steps back. "This is what I propose to do," said Athos. "We will divide our regiments into 2 squadrons. You will put yourself at the head of the first. We and His Majesty will lead the second. If no obstacle occurs, we will both charge together, force the enemy's line, and throw ourselves into the Tyne, which we must cross, either by fording or swimming. If, on the contrary, any repulse should take place, you and your men must fight to the last man, whilst we and the king proceed on our road. Once arrived at the brink of the river, should we even find them 3 ranks deep, as long as you and your regiment do your duty, we will look to the rest." "To horse!" said Lord Winter. "To horse!" re-echoed Athos. "Everything is arranged and decided. Now, gentlemen," cried the king, "forward, and rally to the old cry of France, Montjoy and St. Denis. The war cry of England is too often in the mouths of traitors." They mounted, the king on Winter's horse and Winter on that of the king. Then Winter took his place at the head of the first squadron, and the king, with Athos on his right and Aramis on his left, at the head of the second. The Scotch army stood motionless and silent, seized with shame at sight of these preparations. Some of the chieftains left the ranks and broke their swords in two. "There," said the king. "That consoles me, they are not all traitors." At this moment Winter's voice was raised with the cry of, "Forward!" The first squadron moved off. The second followed and descended from the plateau. A regiment of cuirassiers, nearly equal as to numbers, issued from behind the hill and came full gallop toward it. The king pointed this out. "Sire," said Athos, "we foresaw this, and if Lord Winter's men but do their duty, we are saved instead of lost." At this moment they heard above all the galloping and neighing of the horses Winter's voice crying out, "Sword in hand!" At these words every sword was drawn, and glittered in the air like lightning. "Now, gentlemen," said the king in his turn, excited by this sight, "come, gentlemen, sword in hand." But Aramis and Athos were the only ones to obey this command and the king's example. "We are betrayed," said the king in a low voice. "Wait a moment," said Athos. "Perhaps they do not recognize your Majesty's voice and await the order of their captain. Have they not heard that of their colonel? But look, look!" cried the king, drawing up his horse with a sudden jerk, which threw it on its haunches, and seizing the bridle of Athos's horse. "Ah, cowards! Traitors!" screamed Lord Winter, whose voice they heard, whilst his men, quitting their ranks, dispersed all over the plain. About 15 men were ranged around him and awaited the charge of Cromwell's cuirassiers. "Let us go and die with them," said the king. "Let us go," said Athos and Aramis. "All faithful hearts with me," cried out Winter. This voice was heard by the two friends, who set off, full gallop. "No quarter!" cried a voice in French, answering to that of Winter, which made them tremble. As for Winter, at the sound of that voice he turned pale, and was, as it were, petrified. It was the voice of a cavalier mounted on a magnificent black horse, who was charging at the head of the English regiment, of which, in his ardor, he was 10 steps in advance. "'Tis he!" murmured Winter. His eyes glazed, and he allowed his sword to fall to his side. "The king! The king!" cried out several voices, deceived by the blue ribbon and chestnut horse of Winter. "Take him alive!" "No, it is not the king!" exclaimed the cavalier. "Lord Winter, you are not the king. You are my uncle." At the same moment Mordaunt, for it was he, leveled his pistol at Winter. It went off and the ball entered the heart of the old cavalier, who with one bound on his saddle fell back into the arms of Athos, murmuring, "He is avenged! Think of my mother!" shouted Mordaunt, as his horse plunged and darted off at full gallop. "Wretch!" exclaimed Aramis, raising his pistol as he passed by him. But the powder flashed in the pan and it did not go off. At this moment the whole regiment came up and they fell upon the few men who had held out, surrounding the two Frenchmen. Athos, after making sure that Lord Winter was really dead, let fall the corpse and said, "Come, Aramis, now for the honor of France." And the two Englishmen who were nearest to them fell, mortally wounded. At the same moment a fearful hurrah rent the air and 30 blades glittered about their heads. Suddenly a man sprang out of the English ranks, fell upon Athos, twined arms of steel around him, and tearing his sword from him, said in his ear, "Silence! Yield! You yield to me, do you not?" A giant had seized also Aramis's 2 wrists, who struggled in vain to release himself from this formidable grasp. "Dar!" exclaimed Athos, whilst the Gascon covered his mouth with his hand. "I am your prisoner," said Aramis, giving up his sword to Porthos. "Fire! Fire!" cried Mordaunt, returning to the group surrounding the two friends. "And wherefore fire?" said the colonel. "Every one has yielded." "It is the son of Milady," said Athos to D'Artagnan. "I recognize him." "It is the monk," whispered Porthos to Aramis. "I know it." And now the ranks began to open. D'Artagnan held the bridle of Athos's horse and Porthos that of Aramis. Both of them attempted to lead his prisoner off the battlefield. This movement revealed the spot where Winter's body had fallen. Mordaunt had found it out and was gazing on his dead relative with an expression of malignant hatred. Athos, though now cool and collected, put his hand to his belt, where his loaded pistols yet remained. "What are you about?" said D'Artagnan. "Let me kill him. We are all four lost, if by the least gesture you discover that you recognize him." Then, turning to the young man, he exclaimed, a fine prize, friend Mordaunt. We have both myself and Monsieur du Vallon taken 2 knights of the Garter, nothing less." "But," said Mordaunt, looking at Athos and Aramis with bloodshot eyes, "these are Frenchmen, I imagine. Faith, I don't know. Are you French, sir?" said he to Athos. "I am," replied the latter gravely. "Very well, my dear sir. You are the prisoner of a fellow countryman. But the king, where is the king?" exclaimed Athos anxiously. D'Artagnan vigorously seized his prisoner's hand, saying, "The king? We have secured him." "Yes," said Aramis, "through an infamous act of treason." Porthos pressed his friend's hand and said to him, "Yes, sir, all is fair in war, stratagem as well as force. Look yonder." At this instant the squadron, that ought to have protected Charles's retreat, was advancing to meet the English regiments. The king, who was entirely surrounded, walked alone in a great empty space. He appeared calm, but it was evidently not without a mighty effort. Drops of perspiration trickled down his face, and from time to time he put a handkerchief to his mouth to wipe away the blood that rilled from it. "Behold Nebuchadnezzar!" exclaimed an old Puritan soldier, whose eyes flashed at the sight of the man they called the tyrant. "Do you call him Nebuchadnezzar?" said Mordaunt with a terrible smile. "No, it is Charles I, the king, the good King Charles, who despoils his subjects to enrich himself." Charles glanced a moment at the insolent creature who uttered this, but did not recognize him. Nevertheless, the calm religious dignity of his countenance abashed Mordaunt. "Bonjour, messieurs," said the king to the 2 gentlemen who were held by D'Artagnan and Porthos. "The day has been unfortunate, but it is not your fault, thank God. But where is my old friend Winter?" The 2 gentlemen turned away their heads in silence. "In Strafford's company," said Mordaunt tauntingly. Charles shuddered. The demon had known how to wound him. The remembrance of Strafford was a source of lasting remorse to him, the shadow that haunted him by day and night. The king looked around him. He saw a corpse at his feet. It was Winter's. He uttered not a word, nor shed a tear, but a deadly pallor spread over his face. He knelt down on the ground, raised Winter's head, and unfastening the order of the Saint-Esprit, placed it on his own breast. "Lord Winter is killed, then?" inquired D'Artagnan, fixing his eyes on the corpse. "Yes," said Athos, "by his own nephew. Come, he was the first of us to go." "Peace be to him. He was an honest man," said D'Artagnan. "Charles Stuart," said the colonel of the English regiment, approaching the king, who had just put on the insignia of royalty, "do you yield yourself a prisoner?" "Colonel Tomlison," said Charles, "kings cannot yield. The man alone submits to force. Your sword." The king drew his sword and broke it on his knee. At this moment a horse without a rider, covered with foam, his nostrils extended and eyes all fire, galloped up, and recognizing his master, stopped and neighed with pleasure. It was Arthur. The king smiled, patted it with his hand, and jumped lightly into the saddle. "Now, gentlemen," said he, "conduct me where you will." Turning back again, he said, "I thought I saw Winter move. If he still lives, by all you hold most sacred, do not abandon him." "Never fear, King Charles," said Mordaunt. The bullet pierced his heart. "Do not breathe a word nor make the least sign to me or Porthos," said D'Artagnan to Athos and Aramis, "that you recognize this man, for Milady is not dead. Her soul lives in the body of this demon." The detachment now moved toward the town with the royal captive. But on the road an aide-de-camp from Cromwell sent orders that Colonel Tomlison should conduct him to Holdenby Castle. At the same time, couriers started in every direction over England and Europe to announce that Charles Stuart was the prisoner of Oliver Cromwell. Chapter 57. Oliver Cromwell. "Have you been to the general?" said Mordaunt to D'Artagnan and Porthos. "You know he sent for you after the action." "We want first to put our prisoners in a place of safety," replied D'Artagnan. "Do you know, sir, these gentlemen are each of them worth 1,500 pounds? "Oh, be assured," said Mordaunt, looking at them with an expression he vainly endeavored to soften. "My soldiers will guard them, and guard them well, I promise you." "I shall take better care of them myself," answered D'Artagnan. "Besides, all they require is a good room, with sentinels, or their simple parole that they will not attempt escape. I will go and see about that, and then we shall have the honor of presenting ourselves to the general and receiving his commands for his eminence." "You think of starting at once, then?" inquired Mordaunt. "Our mission is ended, and there is nothing more to detain us now but the good pleasure of the great man to whom we were sent." The young man bit his lips and whispered to his sergeant, "You will follow these men and not lose sight of them. When you have discovered where they lodge, come and await me at the town gate." The sergeant made a sign of comprehension. Instead of following the knot of prisoners that were being taken into the town, Mordaunt turned his steps toward the rising ground from whence Cromwell had witnessed the battle and on which he had just had his tent pitched. Cromwell had given orders that no one was to be allowed admission, but the sentinel, who knew that Mordaunt was one of the most confidential friends of the general, thought the order did not extend to the young man. Mordaunt, therefore, raised the canvas and saw Cromwell seated before a table, his head buried in his hands, his back being turned. Whether he heard Mordaunt or not as he entered, Cromwell did not move. Mordaunt remained standing near the door. At last, after a few moments, Cromwell raised his head, and, as if he divined that someone was there, turned slowly around. "I said I wished to be alone," he exclaimed on seeing the young man. "They thought this order did not concern me, sir. Nevertheless, if you wish it, I am ready to go." "Ah, is it you, Mordaunt?" said Cromwell, the cloud passing away from his face. "Since you are here, it is well. You may remain. I come to congratulate you." "To congratulate me? What for?" "On the capture of Charles Stuart. You are now master of England." "I was much more really so 2 hours ago." "How so, General?" "Because England had need of me to take the tyrant, and now the tyrant is taken." "Have you seen him?" "Yes, sir," said Mordaunt. "What is his bearing?" Mordaunt hesitated, but it seemed as though he was constrained to tell the truth. "Calm and dignified," said he. "What did he say?" "Some parting words to his friends." "His friends," murmured Cromwell. "Has he any friends?" Then he added aloud, "Did he make any resistance?" "No, sir, with the exception of 2 or 3 friends, everyone deserted him. He had no means of resistance." "To whom did he give up his sword?" "He did not give it up, he broke it." "He did well, but instead of breaking it, he might have used it to still more advantage." There was a momentary pause. "I heard that the colonel of the regiment that escorted Charles was killed," said Cromwell, staring very fixedly at Mordaunt. "Yes, sir." "By whom?" inquired Cromwell. "By me." "What was his name?" "Lord Winter." "Your uncle?" exclaimed Cromwell. "My uncle," answered Mordaunt. "But traitors to England are no longer members of my family." Cromwell observed the young man a moment in silence. Then, with that profound melancholy Shakespeare describes so well, "Mordaunt," he said, "you are a terrible servant." "When the Lord commands," said Mordaunt. "His commands are not to be disputed. Abraham raised the knife against Isaac, and Isaac was his son." "Yes," said Cromwell, "but the Lord did not suffer that sacrifice to be accomplished." "I have looked around me," said Mordaunt, "and I have seen neither goat nor kid caught among the bushes of the plain." Cromwell bowed. "You are strong among the strong, Mordaunt," he said. "And the Frenchmen, how did they behave?" "Most fearlessly." "Yes, yes," murmured Cromwell. "The French fight well, and if my glass was good and I mistake not, they were foremost in the fight." "They were," replied Mordaunt. "After you, however," said Cromwell. "It was the fault of their horses, not theirs." Another pause. "And the Scotch? They kept their word and never stirred," said Mordaunt. "Wretched men! Their officers wish to see you, sir." "I have no time to see them." "Are they paid?" "Yes, tonight." "Let them be off and return to their own country, there to hide their shame if its hills are high enough. I have nothing more to do with them nor they with me. And now go, Mordaunt." "Before I go," said Mordaunt, "I have some questions and a favor to ask you, sir." "A favor from me?" Mordaunt bowed. "I come to you, my leader, my head, my father, and I ask you, master, are you contented with me?" Cromwell looked at him with astonishment. The young man remained immovable. "Yes," said Cromwell. "You have done, since I knew you, not only your duty, but more than your duty. You have been a faithful friend, a cautious negotiator, a brave soldier. Do you remember, sir, it was my idea, the Scotch treaty, for giving up the king? Yes, the idea was yours. I had no such contempt for men before. Was I not a good ambassador in France? Yes, for Mazarin has granted what I desire. Have I not always fought for your glory and interests? Too ardently, perhaps. It is what I have just reproached you for. But what is the meaning of all these questions? To tell you, my lord, that the moment has now arrived when, with a single word, you may recompense all these services." "Oh," said Oliver, with a slight curl of his lip, "I forgot that every service merits some reward and that up to this moment you have not been paid. Sir, I can take my pay at this moment, to the full extent of my wishes." "How is that?" "I have the payment under my hand. I almost possess it." "What is it? Have they offered you money? Do you wish a step, or some place in the government?" "Sir, will you grant me my request? Let us hear what it is first." "Sir, when you have told me to obey an order, did I ever answer, 'Let me see that order'? If, however, your wish should be one impossible to fulfill, when you have cherished a wish and have charged me with its fulfillment, have I ever replied, 'It is impossible'? But a request preferred with so much preparation." "Ah, do not fear, sir," said Mordaunt with apparent simplicity. "It will not ruin you." "Well, then," said Cromwell, "I promise, as far as lies in my power, to grant your request. Proceed." "Sir, 2 prisoners were taken this morning. Will you let me have them? For their ransom? Have they then offered a large one?" inquired Cromwell. "On the contrary, I think they are poor, sir." "They are friends of yours, then?" "Yes, sir," exclaimed Mordaunt. "They are friends, dear friends of mine, and I would lay down my life for them." "Very well, Mordaunt," exclaimed Cromwell, pleased at having his opinion of the young man raised once more. "I will give them to you. I will not even ask who they are. Do as you like with them." "Thank you, sir," exclaimed Mordaunt. "Thank you. My life is always at your service, and should I lose it I should still owe you something. Thank you. You have indeed repaid me munificently for my services." He threw himself at the feet of Cromwell, and in spite of the efforts of the Puritan general, who did not like this almost kingly homage, he took his hand and kissed it. "What?" said Cromwell, arresting him for a moment as he arose. "Is there nothing more you wish? Neither gold nor rank. You have given me all you can give me, and from today your debt is paid." And Mordaunt darted out of the general's tent, his heart beating and his eyes sparkling with joy. Cromwell gazed a moment after him. "He has slain his uncle," he murmured. "Alas, what are my servants? Possibly this one, who asks nothing or seems to ask nothing, has asked more in the eyes of heaven than those who tax the country and steal the bread of the poor. Nobody serves me for nothing. Charles, who is my prisoner, may still have friends, but I have none." And with a deep sigh he again sank into the reverie that had been interrupted by Mordaunt. Chapter 58. Jesus Seigneur. Whilst Mordaunt was making his way to Cromwell's tent, D'Artagnan and Porthos had brought their prisoners to the house which had been assigned to them as their dwelling at Newcastle. The order given by Mordaunt to the sergeant had been heard by D'Artagnan, who accordingly, by an expressive glance, warned Athos and Aramis to exercise extreme caution. The prisoners, therefore, had remained silent as they marched along in company with their conquerors, which they could do with the less difficulty since each of them had occupation enough in answering his own thoughts. It would be impossible to describe Mousqueton's astonishment when from the threshold of the door he saw the 4 friends approaching, followed by a sergeant with a dozen men. He rubbed his eyes, doubting if he really saw before him Athos and Aramis, and forced at last to yield to evidence, he was on the point of breaking forth in exclamations when he encountered a glance from the eyes of Porthos, the repressive force of which he was not inclined to dispute. Mousqueton remained glued to the door, awaiting the explanation of this strange occurrence. What upset him completely was that the 4 friends seemed to have no acquaintance with one another. The house to which D'Artagnan and Porthos conducted Athos and Aramis was the one assigned to them by General Cromwell, and of which they had taken possession on the previous evening. It was at the corner of 2 streets and had in the rear, bordering on the side street, stables and a sort of garden. The windows on the ground floor, according to a custom in provincial villages, were barred, so that they strongly resembled the windows of a prison. The 2 friends made the prisoners enter the house first, whilst they stood at the door, desiring Mousqueton to take the 4 horses to the stable. "Why don't we go in with them?" asked Porthos. "We must first see what the sergeant wishes us to do," replied D'Artagnan. The sergeant and his men took possession of the little garden. D'Artagnan asked them what they wished and why they had taken that position. "We have had orders," answered the man, "to help you in taking care of your prisoners." There could be no fault to find with this arrangement. On the contrary, it seemed to be a delicate attention, to be gratefully received. D'Artagnan, therefore, thanked the man and gave him a crown piece to drink to General Cromwell's health. The sergeant answered that Puritans never drank, and put the crown piece in his pocket. "Ah," said Porthos, "what a fearful day, my dear D'Artagnan! What a fearful day, when today we find our friends." "Yes, but under what circumstances? 'Tis true that our position is an awkward one, but let us go in and see more clearly what is to be done." "Things look black enough," replied Porthos. "I understand now why Aramis advised me to strangle that horrible Mordaunt." "Silence!" cried the Gascon. "Do not utter that name." "But," argued Porthos, "I speak French and they are all English." D'Artagnan looked at Porthos with that air of wonder which a cunning man cannot help feeling at displays of crass stupidity. But as Porthos on his side could not comprehend his astonishment, he merely pushed him indoors, saying, "Let us go in." They found Athos in profound despondency. Aramis looked first at Porthos and then at D'Artagnan, without speaking, but the latter understood his meaningful look. "You want to know how we came here? 'Tis easily guessed. Mazarin sent us with a letter to General Cromwell." "But how came you to fall into company with Mordaunt, whom I bade you distrust?" asked Athos. "And whom I advised you to strangle?" "Porthos," said Aramis. "Mazarin again. Cromwell had sent him to Mazarin. Mazarin sent us to Cromwell. There is a certain fatality in it." "Yes, you are right, D'Artagnan. A fatality that will separate and ruin us. So, my dear Aramis, say no more about it and let us prepare to submit to destiny." "Zounds! On the contrary, let us speak about it. For it was agreed among us, once for all, that we should always hold together, though engaged on opposing sides." "Yes," added Athos. "I now ask you, D'Artagnan, what side you are on." "Ah, behold for what end the wretched Mazarin has made use of you. Do you know in what crime you are today engaged? In the capture of a king, his degradation and his murder." "Oh, oh!" cried Porthos. "Do you think so?" "You are exaggerating, Athos. We are not so far gone as that," replied the lieutenant. "Good heavens! We are on the very eve of it. I say, why is the king taken prisoner? Those who wish to respect him as a master would not buy him as a slave. Do you think it is to replace him on the throne that Cromwell has paid for him 200,000 pounds sterling? They will kill him, you may be sure of it." "I don't maintain the contrary," said D'Artagnan. "But what's that to us? I am here because I am a soldier and have to obey orders. I have taken an oath to obey, and I do obey. But you who have taken no such oath, Why are you here, and what cause do you represent? That most sacred in the world, said Athos. The cause of misfortune, of religion, royalty. A friend, a wife, a daughter, have done us the honor to call us to their aid. We have served them to the best of our poor means, and God will recompense the will, forgive the want of power. You may see matters differently, D'Artagnan, and think otherwise. I will not attempt to argue with you, but I blame you. Heyday, cried D'Artagnan. What matters it to me, after all, if Cromwell, who's an Englishman, revolts against his king, who is a Scotchman? I am myself a Frenchman. I have nothing to do with these things. Why hold me responsible? Yes, said Porthos, because all gentlemen are brothers, because you are a gentleman, because the kings of all countries are the first among gentlemen, because the blind populace, ungrateful and brutal, always takes pleasure in pulling down what is above them. And you, D'Artagnan, a man sprung from the ancient nobility of France, bearing an honorable name, carrying a good sword, have helped to give up a king to beer-sellers, shopkeepers, and wagoners. Ah, D'Artagnan, perhaps you have done your duty as a soldier, but as a gentleman, I say that you are very culpable. D'Artagnan was chewing the stalk of a flower, unable to reply and thoroughly uncomfortable, for when turned from the eyes of Athos he encountered those of Aramis. And you, Porthos, continued the Count, as if in consideration for D'Artagnan's embarrassment, you, the best heart, the best friend, the best soldier that I know, you with a soul that makes you worthy of a berth on the steps of a throne, and who, sooner or later, must receive your reward from an intelligent king. You, my dear Porthos, you, a gentleman in manners, in tastes, and in courage, you are as culpable as D'Artagnan. Porthos blushed, but with pleasure rather than with confusion. And yet, bowing his head, as if humiliated, he said, Yes, yes, my dear Count, I feel that you are right. Athos arose. Come, he said, stretching out his hand to D'Artagnan. Come, don't be sullen, my dear son, for I have said all this to you, if not in the tone, at least with the feelings of a father. It would have been easier to me merely to have thanked you for preserving my life and not to have uttered a word of all this. Doubtless, Athos. But here it is, you have sentiments, the devil knows what, such as everyone can't entertain. Who could suppose that a sensible man could leave his house, France, his ward, a charming youth, for we saw him in the camp, to fly to the aid of a rotten, worm-eaten royalty, which is going to crumble one of these days like an old hovel? The sentiments you air are certainly fine, so fine that they are superhuman. However that may be, D'Artagnan, replied Athos, without falling into the snare which his Gascon friend had prepared for him by an appeal to his parental love. However that may be, you know in the bottom of your heart that it is true, but I am wrong to dispute with my master. D'Artagnan, I am your prisoner. Treat me as such. Ah, pardieu, said D'Artagnan. You know you will not be my prisoner very long. No, said Aramis. They will doubtless treat us like the prisoners of the Philipgots. And how were they treated? Asked D'Artagnan. Why, said Aramis, one half were hanged and the other half were shot. Well, said D'Artagnan, I answer that while there remains a drop of blood in my veins you will be neither hanged nor shot. Sang Dieu, let them come on. Besides, do you see that door, Athos? Yes, what then? Well, you can go out by that door whenever you please, for from this moment you are free as the air. I recognize you there, my brave D'Artagnan, replied Athos. But you are no longer our masters. That door is guarded, D'Artagnan. You know that. Very well, you will force it, said Porthos. There are only a dozen men at the most. That would be nothing for us four. It is too much for us two. No, divided as we now are, we must perish. See the fatal example. On the Vendemois road, D'Artagnan, you so brave, and you, Porthos, so valiant and so strong. You were beaten. Today Aramis and I are beaten in our turn. Now that never happened to us when we were four together. Let us die, then, as De Winter has died. As for me, I will fly only on condition that we all fly together. Impossible, said D'Artagnan. We are under Mazarin's orders. I know it and I have nothing more to say. My arguments lead to nothing. Doubtless they are bad, since they have not determined minds so just as yours. Besides, said Aramis, Had they taken effect, it would be still better not to compromise two excellent friends like D'Artagnan and Porthos. Be assured, gentlemen, we shall do you honor in our dying. As for myself, I shall be proud to face the bullets, or even the rope, in company with you, Athos. For you have never seemed to me so grand as you are today. D'Artagnan said nothing, but, after having gnawed the flower stalk, he began to bite his nails. At last, "Do you imagine," he resumed, "that they mean to kill you? And wherefore should they do so? What interest have they in your death? Moreover, you are our prisoners." "Fool!" cried Aramis. "Knowest thou not, then, Mordaunt? I have but exchanged with him one look, yet that look convinced me that we were doomed. The truth is, I'm very sorry that I did not strangle him as you advised me," said Porthos. "Eh, I make no account of the harm Mordaunt can do," cried D'Artagnan. "Cap de Dieu! If he troubles me too much I will crush him. The insect! Do not fly, then. It is useless, for I swear to you that you are as safe here as you were 20 years ago. You, Athos, in the Rue Ferou, and you, Aramis, in the Rue de Vaugirard." "Stop!" cried Athos, extending his hand to one of the grated windows by which the room was lighted. "You will soon know what to expect, for here he is." "Who?" "Mordaunt." In fact, looking at the place to which Athos pointed, D'Artagnan saw a cavalier coming toward the house at full gallop. It was Mordaunt. D'Artagnan rushed out of the room. Porthos wanted to follow him. "Stay," said D'Artagnan, "and do not come till you hear me drum my fingers on the door." When Mordaunt arrived opposite the house, he saw D'Artagnan on the threshold and the soldiers lying on the grass here and there, with their arms. "Halloo!" he cried. "Are the prisoners still there?" "Yes, sir," answered the sergeant, uncovering. "'Tis well. Order 4 men to conduct them to my lodging." 4 men prepared to do so. "What is it?" said D'Artagnan, with that jeering manner which our readers have so often observed in him since they made his acquaintance. "What is the matter, if you please?" "Sir," replied Mordaunt, "I have ordered the 2 prisoners we made this morning to be conducted to my lodging." "Wherefore, sir?" "Excuse curiosity, but I wish to be enlightened on the subject." "Because these prisoners, sir, are at my disposal and I choose to dispose of them as I like." Allow me, sir," said D'Artagnan, "to observe you are in error. The prisoners belong to those who take them and not to those who only saw them taken. You might have taken Lord Winter, who, 'tis said, was your uncle, prisoner, but you preferred killing him. 'Tis well, we, that is, Monsieur du Vallon and I, could have killed our prisoners, we preferred taking them." Mordaunt's very lips grew white with rage. D'Artagnan now saw that affairs were growing worse, and he beat the guard's march upon the door. At the first beat Porthos rushed out and stood on the other side of the door. This movement was observed by Mordaunt. "Sir," he thus addressed D'Artagnan, "your resistance is useless. These prisoners have just been given me by my illustrious patron, Oliver Cromwell." These words struck D'Artagnan like a thunderbolt. The blood mounted to his temples, his eyes became dim. He saw from what fountainhead the ferocious hopes of the young man arose, and he put his hand to the hilt of his sword. As for Porthos, he looked inquiringly at D'Artagnan. This look of Porthos's made the Gascon regret that he had summoned the brute force of his friend to aid him in an affair which seemed to require chiefly cunning. "Violence," he said to himself, "would spoil all. D'Artagnan, my friend, prove to this young serpent that thou art not only stronger, but more subtle than he is." "Ah," he said, making a low bow. "Why did you not begin by saying that, Monsieur Mordaunt? What, are you sent by General Oliver Cromwell, the most illustrious captain of the age?" "I have this instant left him," replied Mordaunt, alighting, "in order to give his horse to a soldier to hold." "Why did you not say so at once, my dear sir? All England is with Cromwell, and since you ask for my prisoners, I bend, sir, to your wishes. They are yours. Take them." Mordaunt, delighted, advanced, Porthos looking at D'Artagnan with open-mouthed astonishment. Then D'Artagnan trod on his foot, and Porthos began to understand that this was merely acting. Mordaunt put his foot on the first step of the door and, with his hat in hand, prepared to pass by the 2 friends, motioning to the 4 men to follow him. "But pardon," said D'Artagnan, with the most charming smile and putting his hand on the young man's shoulder. "If the illustrious General Oliver Cromwell has disposed of our prisoners in your favor, he has, of course, made that act of donation in writing." Mordaunt stopped short. "He has given you some little writing for me, the least bit of paper which may show that you come in his name. Be pleased to give me that scrap of paper so that I may justify, by a pretext at least, my abandoning my countrymen. Otherwise, you see, although I am sure that General Oliver Cromwell can intend them no harm, it would have a bad appearance." Mordaunt recoiled. He felt the blow and discharged a terrible look at D'Artagnan, who responded by the most amiable expression that ever graced a human countenance. "When I tell you a thing, sir," said Mordaunt, "you insult me by doubting it." "I," cried D'Artagnan, "I doubt what you say. God keep me from it, my dear Monsieur Mordaunt. On the contrary, I take you to be a worthy and accomplished gentleman. And then, sir, do you wish me to speak freely to you?" continued D'Artagnan with his frank expression. "Speak out, sir," said Mordaunt. "Monsieur du Vallon yonder is rich and has 40,000 francs yearly, so he does not care about money. I do not speak for him, but for myself." "Well, sir? What more?" "Well, I am not rich. In Gascony 'tis no dishonor, sir, nobody is rich, and Henry IV, of glorious memory, who was the king of the Gascons, as his Majesty Philip IV, is the king of the Spaniards, never had a penny in his pocket. Go on, sir, I see what you wish to get at, and if it is simply what I think that stops you, I can obviate the difficulty." "Ah, I knew well," said the Gascon, "that you were a man of talent. Well, here's the case, here's where the saddle hurts me, as we French say. I am an officer of fortune, nothing else. I have nothing but what my sword brings me in, that is to say, more blows than banknotes. Now, on taking prisoners, this morning, 2 Frenchmen, who seemed to me of high birth, in short, 2 knights of the Garter, I said to myself, my fortune is made. I say 2 because in such circumstances, Monsieur du Vallon, who is rich, always gives me his prisoners." Mordaunt, completely deceived by the wordy civility of D'Artagnan, smiled like a man who understands perfectly the reasons given him, and said, "I shall have the order signed directly, sir, and with it 2,000 pistoles. Meanwhile, let me take these men away." "No," replied D'Artagnan. "What signifies a delay of half an hour? I am a man of order, sir. Let us do things in order." "Nevertheless," replied Mordaunt, "I could compel you. I command here." "Ah, sir," said D'Artagnan, "I see that although we have had the honor of traveling in your company, you do not know us. We are gentlemen. We are, both of us, able to kill you and your 8 men, we 2 only. For heaven's sake, don't be obstinate, for when others are obstinate I am obstinate likewise, and then I become ferocious and headstrong, and there's my friend, who is even more headstrong and ferocious than myself. Besides, we are sent here by Cardinal Mazarin, and at this moment represent both the king and the cardinal, and are, therefore, as ambassadors able to act with impunity, a thing that General Oliver Cromwell, who is assuredly as great a politician as he is a general, is quite the man to understand. Ask him, then, for the written order." "What will that cost you, my dear Monsieur Mordaunt?" "Yes, the written order," said Porthos, who now began to comprehend what D'Artagnan was aiming at. "We ask only for that." However inclined Mordaunt was to have recourse to violence, he understood the reasons D'Artagnan had given him. Besides, completely ignorant of the friendship which existed between the 4 Frenchmen, all his uneasiness disappeared when he heard of the plausible motive of the ransom. He decided, therefore, not only to fetch the order, but the 2,000 pistoles, at which he estimated the prisoners. He therefore mounted his horse and disappeared. "Good," thought D'Artagnan. "A quarter of an hour to go to the tent, a quarter of an hour to return. It is more than we need." Then turning, without the least change of countenance, to Porthos, he said, looking him full in the face, "Friend Porthos, listen to this. First, not a syllable to either of our friends of what you have heard. It is unnecessary for them to know the service we are going to render them." "Very well. I understand. Go to the stable, you will find Musketeer there. Saddle your horses, put your pistols in your saddlebags, take out the horses and lead them to the street below this, so that there will be nothing to do but mount them. All the rest is my business." Porthos made no remark, but obeyed, with the sublime confidence he had in his friend. "I go," he said. "Only, shall I enter the chamber where those gentlemen are?" "No, it is not worth while." "Well, do me the kindness to take my purse, which I left on the mantelpiece." "All right." He then proceeded, with his usual calm gait, to the stable and went into the very midst of the soldiery, who, foreigner as he was, could not help admiring his height and the enormous strength of his great limbs. At the corner of the street he met Musketeer and took him with him. D'Artagnan, meantime, went into the house, whistling a tune which he had begun before Porthos went away. "My dear Athos, I have reflected on your arguments, and I am convinced. I am sorry to have had anything to do with this matter. As you say, Mazarin is a knave. I have resolved to fly with you, not a word, be ready. Your swords are in the corner. Do not forget them, they are in many circumstances very useful. There is Porthos's purse, too. He put it into his pocket." The two friends were perfectly stupefied. "Well, pray, is there anything to be so surprised at?" he said. "I was blind. Athos has made me see, that's all. Come here." The two friends went near him. "Do you see that street? There are the horses. Go out by the door, turn to the right, jump into your saddles, all will be right. Don't be uneasy at anything except mistaking the signal. That will be the signal when I call out, 'Jesus Seigneur.' But give us your word that you will come too, D'Artagnan," said Athos. "I swear I will, by heaven." "'Tis settled," said Aramis. "At the cry 'Jesus Seigneur' we go out, upset all that stands in our way, run to our horses, jump into our saddles, spur them. Is that all?" "Exactly. See, Aramis, as I have told you, D'Artagnan is first amongst us all," said Athos. "Very true," replied the Gascon. "But I always run away from compliments. Don't forget the signal, 'Jesus Seigneur.'" And he went out as he came in, whistling the self-same air. The soldiers were playing or sleeping. Two of them were singing in a corner, out of tune, the psalm, "On the rivers of Babylon." D'Artagnan called the sergeant. "My dear friend, General Cromwell has sent Monsieur Mordaunt to fetch me. Guard the prisoners well, I beg of you." The sergeant made a sign, as much as to say he did not understand French, and D'Artagnan tried to make him comprehend by signs and gestures. Then he went into the stable. He found the 5 horses saddled, his own amongst the rest. "Each of you take a horse by the bridle," he said to Porthos and Musketeer. "Turn to the left, so that Athos and Aramis may see you clearly from the window." "They are coming, then?" said Porthos. "In a moment. You didn't forget my purse?" "No, be easy." "Good." Porthos and Musketeer each took a horse by the bridle and proceeded to their post. Then D'Artagnan, being alone, struck a light and lighted a small bit of tinder, mounted his horse and stopped at the door in the midst of the soldiers. There, caressing as he pretended the animal with his hand, he put this bit of burning tinder in his ear. It was necessary to be as good a horseman as he was to risk such a scheme, for no sooner had the animal felt the burning tinder than he uttered a cry of pain and reared and jumped as if he had been mad. The soldiers, whom he was nearly trampling, ran away. "Help! Help!" cried D'Artagnan. "Stop! My horse has the staggers." In an instant the horse's eyes grew bloodshot and he was white with foam. "Help!" cried D'Artagnan. "What? Will you let me be killed? Jesus Seigneur!" No sooner had he uttered this cry than the door opened and Athos and Aramis rushed out. The coast, owing to the Gascon stratagem, was clear. "The prisoners are escaping! The prisoners are escaping!" cried the sergeant. "Stop! Stop!" cried D'Artagnan, giving rein to his famous steed, who, darting forth, overturned several men. "Stop! Stop!" cried the soldiers and ran for their arms. But the prisoners were in their saddles and lost no time hastening to the nearest gate. In the middle of the street they saw Grimaud and Blaisois, who were coming to find their masters. With one wave of his hand Athos made Grimaud, who followed the little troop, understand everything, and they passed on like a whirlwind, D'Artagnan still directing them from behind with his voice. They passed through the gate like apparitions, without the guards thinking of detaining them, and reached the open country. All this time the soldiers were calling out, "Stop! Stop!" And the sergeant, who began to see that he was the victim of an artifice, was almost in a frenzy of despair. Whilst all this was going on, a cavalier in full gallop was seen approaching. It was Mordaunt with the order in his hand. "The prisoners!" he exclaimed, jumping off his horse. The sergeant had not the courage to reply. He showed him the open door, the empty room. Mordaunt darted to the steps, understood all, uttered a cry, as if his very heart was pierced, and fell fainting on the stone steps. Chapter 59. Noble natures never lose courage, nor good stomachs their appetites. The little troop, without looking behind them or exchanging a word, fled at a rapid gallop, fording a little stream, of which none of them knew the name, and leaving on their left a town which Athos declared to be Durham. At last they came in sight of a small wood, and spurring their horses afresh, rode in its direction. As soon as they had disappeared behind a green curtain sufficiently thick to conceal them from the sight of anyone who might be in pursuit, they drew up to hold a council together. The two grooms held the horses, that they might take a little rest without being unsaddled, and Grimaud was posted as sentinel. "Come, first of all," said Athos to D'Artagnan, "my friend, that I may shake hands with you, you our rescuer, you the true hero of us all." "Athos is right, you have my adoration," said Aramis, in his turn pressing his hand. "To what are you not equal, with your superior intelligence, infallible eye, your arm of iron and your enterprising mind?" "Now," said the Gascon, "that is all well, I accept for Porthos and myself everything, thanks and compliments, we have plenty of time to spare." The two friends, recalled by D'Artagnan to what was also due to Porthos, pressed his hand in their turn. "And now," said Athos, "it is not our plan to run anywhere and like madmen, but we must map up our campaign. What shall we do? What are we going to do, i'faith? It is not very difficult to say. Tell us, then, D'Artagnan. We are going to reach the nearest seaport, unite our little resources, hire a vessel and return to France. As for me, I will give my last sou for it. Life is the greatest treasure, and speaking candidly, ours hangs by a thread. What do you say to this, Du Vallon?" "I," said Porthos, "I am entirely of D'Artagnan's opinion. This is a beastly country, this England." "You are quite decided, then, to leave it?" asked Athos of D'Artagnan. "Egad, I don't see what is to keep me here." A glance was exchanged between Athos and Aramis. "Go then, my friends," said the former, sighing. "How go then?" exclaimed D'Artagnan. "Let us go, you mean?" "No, my friend," said Athos. "You must leave us." "Leave you?" cried D'Artagnan, quite bewildered at this unexpected announcement. "Bah!" said Porthos. "Why separate, since we are all together? Because you can and ought to return to France. Your mission is accomplished, but ours is not." "Your mission is not accomplished?" exclaimed D'Artagnan, looking in astonishment at Athos. "No, my friend," replied Athos in his gentle but decided voice. "We came here to defend King Charles. We have but ill defended him. It remains for us to save him." "To save the king?" said D'Artagnan, looking at Aramis as he had looked at Athos. Aramis contented himself by making a sign with his head. D'Artagnan's countenance took an expression of the deepest compassion. He began to think he had to do with madmen. "You cannot be speaking seriously, Athos," said he. "The king is surrounded by an army which is conducting him to London. This army is commanded by a butcher or the son of a butcher, it matters little, Colonel Harrison. His Majesty, I can assure you, will be tried on his arrival in London. I have heard enough from the lips of Oliver Cromwell to know what to expect." A second look was exchanged between Athos and Aramis. "And when the trial is ended there will be no delay in putting the sentence into execution," continued D'Artagnan. "And to what penalty do you think the king will be condemned?" asked Athos. "The penalty of death, I greatly fear. They have gone too far for him to pardon them, and there is nothing left to them but one thing, and that is to kill him. Have you never heard what Oliver Cromwell said when he came to Paris and was shown the dungeon at Vincennes where Monsieur de Vendôme was imprisoned?" "What did he say?" asked Porthos. Princes must be knocked on the head. I remember it, said Athos. And you fancy he will not put his maxim into execution, now that he has got hold of the king? On the contrary, I am certain he will do so. But then that is all the more reason why we should not abandon the august head so threatened. Athos, you are becoming mad. No, my friend, Athos gently replied. But de Winter sought us out in France and introduced us, Monsieur de Herblay and myself, to Madame Henrietta. Her Majesty did us the honor to ask our aid for her husband. We engaged our word. Our word included everything. It was our strength, our intelligence, our life, in short, that we promised. It remains now for us to keep our word. Is that your opinion, D'Herblay? Yes, said Aramis. We have promised. Then, continued Athos, we have another reason. It is this, listen. In France at this moment everything is poor and paltry. We have a king 10 years old, who doesn't yet know what he wants. We have a queen blinded by a belated passion. We have a minister who governs France as he would govern a great farm, that is to say, intent only on turning out all the gold he can by the exercise of Italian cunning and invention. We have princes who set up a personal and egotistic opposition, who will draw from Mazarin's hands only a few ingots of gold or some shreds of power granted as bribes. I have served them without enthusiasm. God knows that I estimated them at their real value, and that they are not high in my esteem, but on principle. Today I am engaged in a different affair. I have encountered misfortune in a high place, a royal misfortune, a European misfortune. I attach myself to it. If we can succeed in saving the king, it will be good. If we die for him, it will be grand. So you know beforehand you must perish, said D'Artagnan. We fear so, and our only regret is to die so far from both of you. What will you do in a foreign land, an enemy's country? I traveled in England when I was young. I speak English like an Englishman, and Aramis, too, knows something of the language. Ah, if we had you, my friends, with you, D'Artagnan, with you, Porthos, all four reunited for the first time for 20 years, we would dare not only England, but the 3 kingdoms put together. And did you promise the Queen, resumed D'Artagnan petulantly, to storm the Tower of London, to kill 100,000 soldiers, to fight victoriously against the wishes of the nation and the ambition of a man, and when that man is Cromwell? Do not exaggerate your duty. In heaven's name, my dear Athos, do not make a useless sacrifice. When I see you merely, you look like a reasonable being. When you speak, I seem to have to do with a madman. Come, Porthos, join me. Say frankly, what do you think of this business? Nothing good, replied Porthos. Come, continued D'Artagnan, who, irritated that instead of listening to him Athos seemed to be attending to his own thoughts. You have never found yourself the worse for my advice. Well, then, believe me, Athos, your mission is ended, and ended nobly. Return to France with us. Friend, said Athos, our resolution is irrevocable. Then you have some other motive unknown to us? Athos smiled, and D'Artagnan struck his hands together in anger and muttered the most convincing reasons that he could discover. But to all these reasons Athos contented himself by replying with a calm, sweet smile, and Aramis by nodding his head. Very well, cried D'Artagnan at last, furious. Very well, since you wish it. Let us leave our bones in this beggarly land, where it is always cold, where fine weather is a fog, fog is rain, and rain a deluge, where the sun represents the moon and the moon a cream cheese. In truth, whether we die here or elsewhere matters little, since we must die. Only reflect, my good fellow, said Athos. It is but dying rather sooner. Pooh! A little sooner or a little later, it isn't worth quarreling over. If I am astonished at anything, remarked Porthos sententiously, it is that it has not already happened. Oh, it will happen, you may be sure, said D'Artagnan. So it is agreed, and if Porthos makes no objection. Said Porthos, I will do whatever you please, and besides, I think what the Comte de la Fere said just now is very good. But your future career, D'Artagnan? Your ambition, Porthos? Our future, our ambition, replied D'Artagnan, with feverish volubility. Need we think of that since we are to save the king? The king saved, we shall assemble our friends together. We will head the Puritans, reconquer England. We shall re-enter London, place him securely on his throne, and he will make us dukes and peers, said Porthos, whose eyes sparkled with joy at this imaginary prospect. Or he will forget us, added D'Artagnan. Oh, said Porthos. Well, that has happened, friend Porthos. It seems to me that we once rendered Anne of Austria a service not much less than that which today we are trying to perform for Charles I. But none the less Anne of Austria has forgotten us for 20 years. Well, in spite of that, D'Artagnan, said Athos, you are not sorry that you were useful to her? No, indeed, said D'Artagnan. I admit even that in my darkest moments I find consolation in that remembrance. You see, then, D'Artagnan, though princes often are ungrateful, God never is. Athos, said D'Artagnan, I believe that were you to fall in with the devil, you would conduct yourself so well that you would take him with you to heaven. So, then, said Athos, offering his hand to D'Artagnan. 'Tis settled, replied D'Artagnan. I find England a charming country, and I stay, but on one condition only. What is it? That I am not forced to learn English. Well now, said Athos triumphantly, I swear to you, my friend, by the God who hears us, I believe that there is a power watching over us, and that we shall all four see France again. So be it, said D'Artagnan. But I confess I have a contrary conviction. Our good D'Artagnan, said Aramis, represents among us the opposition in Parliament, which always says no and always does aye, but in the meantime saves the country, added Athos. Well, now that everything is decided, cried Porthos, rubbing his hands, suppose we think of dinner. It seems to me that, in the most critical positions of our lives, we have always dined. Oh, yes, speak of dinner in a country where for a feast they eat boiled mutton, and as a treat drink beer. What the devil did you come to such a country for, Athos? But I forgot, added the Gascon, smiling. Pardon, I forgot you are no longer Athos. But never mind, let us hear your plan for dinner, Porthos. My plan? Yes, have you a plan? No, I am hungry, that is all. Pardon you, if that is all, I am hungry too. But it is not everything to be hungry, one must find something to eat, unless we browse on the grass like our horses. Ah! exclaimed Aramis, who was not quite so indifferent to the good things of the earth as Athos. Do you remember, when we were at Parpaillot, the beautiful oysters that we ate? And the legs of mutton of the salt marshes, said Porthos, smacking his lips. But, suggested D'Artagnan, have we not our friend Musketeer, who managed for us so well at Chantilly, Porthos? Yes, said Porthos. We have Musketeer, but since he has been steward, he has become very heavy. Never mind, let us call him, and to make sure that he will reply agreeably. Here, Mouston, cried Porthos. Mouston appeared with a most piteous face. What is the matter, my dear Mouston? asked D'Artagnan. Are you ill? Sir, I am very hungry, replied Mouston. Well, it is just for that reason that we have called you my good Mouston. Could you not procure us a few of those nice little rabbits, and some of those delicious partridges, of which you used to make fricassees at the hotel? Faith, I do not remember the name of the hotel. At the hotel of, said Porthos. By my faith, nor do I remember it either. It does not matter. And a few of those bottles of old Burgundy wine, which cured your master so quickly of his sprain. Alas, sir, said Musketeer, I much fear that what you ask for are very rare things in this detestable and barren country, and I think we should do better to go and seek hospitality from the owner of a little house we see on the fringe of the forest. How? Is there a house in the neighborhood? asked D'Artagnan. Yes, sir, replied Musketeer. Well, let us, as you say, go and ask a dinner from the master of that house. What is your opinion, gentlemen, and does not Mouston's suggestion appear to you full of sense? Oh, said Aramis, suppose the master is a Puritan? So much the better, Mordioux, replied D'Artagnan. If he is a Puritan, we will inform him of the capture of the king, and in honor of the news he will kill for us his fatted hens. But if he should be a cavalier, said Porthos, in that case we will put on an air of mourning, and he will pluck for us his black fowls. "You are very happy?" exclaimed Athos, laughing, in spite of himself, at the sally of the irresistible Gascon. "For you see the bright side of everything. What would you have?" said D'Artagnan. "I come from a land where there is not a cloud in the sky." "It is not like this, then?" said Porthos, stretching out his hand to assure himself whether a chill sensation he felt on his cheek was not really caused by a drop of rain. "Come, come," said D'Artagnan. "More reason why we should start on our journey." "Halloo, Grimaud!" Grimaud appeared. "Well, Grimaud, my friend, have you seen anything?" asked the Gascon. "Nothing," replied Grimaud. "Those idiots!" cried Porthos. "They have not even pursued us. Oh, if we had been in their place!" "Yes, they are wrong," said D'Artagnan. "I would willingly have said 2 words to Mordaunt in this little desert. It is an excellent spot for bringing down a man in proper style." "I think, decidedly," observed Aramis, "gentlemen, that the son hasn't his mother's energy." "What, my good fellow?" replied Athos. "Wait a while. We have scarcely left him 2 hours ago. He does not know yet in what direction we came nor where we are. We may say that he is not equal to his mother when we put foot in France, if we are not poisoned or killed before then." "Meanwhile, let us dine," suggested Porthos. "I faith, yes," said Athos, "for I am hungry." "Look out for the black fowls," cried Aramis, and the 4 friends, guided by Mousqueton, took up the way toward the house, already almost restored to their former gaiety. For they were now, as Athos had said, all 4 once more united and of single mind. Chapter 60. Respect to Fallen Majesty. As our fugitives approached the house, they found the ground cut up, as if a considerable body of horsemen had preceded them. Before the door the traces were yet more apparent. These horsemen, whoever they might be, had halted there. "Egad!" cried D'Artagnan. "It's quite clear that the king and his escort have been by here." "The devil!" said Porthos. "In that case they have eaten everything." "Bah!" said D'Artagnan. "They will have left a chicken at least." He dismounted and knocked on the door. There was no response. He pushed open the door and found the first room empty and deserted. "Well?" cried Porthos. "I can see nobody," said D'Artagnan. "Aha! What? Blood!" At this word the 3 friends leaped from their horses and entered. D'Artagnan had already opened the door of the second room, and from the expression of his face it was clear that he there beheld some extraordinary object. The 3 friends drew near and discovered a young man stretched on the ground, bathed in a pool of blood. It was evident that he had attempted to regain his bed, but had not had sufficient strength to do so. Athos, who imagined that he saw him move, was the first to go up to him. "Well?" inquired D'Artagnan. "Well, if he is dead," said Athos. "He has not been so long, for he is still warm. But no, his heart is beating. Ho, there, my friend!" The wounded man heaved a sigh. D'Artagnan took some water in the hollow of his hand and threw it upon his face. The man opened his eyes, made an effort to raise his head, and fell back again. The wound was in the top of his skull and blood was flowing copiously. Aramis dipped a cloth into some water and applied it to the gash. Again the wounded man opened his eyes and looked in astonishment at these strangers, who appeared to pity him. "You are among friends," said Athos in English. "So cheer up, and tell us, if you have the strength to do so, what has happened?" "The king," muttered the wounded man. "The king is a prisoner." "You have seen him?" asked Aramis in the same language. The man made no reply. "Make your mind easy," resumed Athos. "We are all faithful servants of his majesty." "Is what you tell me true?" asked the wounded man. "On our honor as gentlemen." "Then I may tell you all. I am brother to Parry, his majesty's lackey." Athos and Aramis remembered that this was the name by which de Winter had called the man they had found in the passage of the king's tent. "We know him," said Athos. "He never left the king." "Yes, that is he. Well, he thought of me when he saw the king was taken, and as they were passing before the house he begged in the king's name that they would stop, as the king was hungry. They brought him into this room and placed sentinels at the doors and windows. Parry knew this room, as he had often been to see me when the king was at Newcastle. He knew that there was a trapdoor communicating with a cellar, from which one could get into the orchard. He made a sign, which I understood, but the king's guards must have noticed it and held themselves on guard. I went out as if to fetch wood, passed through the subterranean passage into the cellar, and whilst Perry was gently bolting the door, pushed up the board and beckoned to the king to follow me. Alas, he would not, but Perry clasped his hands and implored him, and at last he agreed. I went on first, fortunately. The king was a few steps behind me, when suddenly I saw something rise up in front of me like a huge shadow. I wanted to cry out to warn the king, but that very moment I felt a blow as if the house was falling on my head, and fell insensible. When I came to myself again, I was stretched in the same place. I dragged myself as far as the yard. The king and his escort were no longer there. I spent perhaps an hour in coming from the yard to this place. Then my strength gave out and I fainted again. "And now how are you feeling?" "Very ill," replied the wounded man. "Can we do anything for you?" asked Athos. "Help to put me on the bed. I think I shall feel better there." "Have you anyone to depend on for assistance?" "My wife is at Durham and may return at any moment." "But you? Is there nothing that you want?" "We came here with the intention of asking for something to eat. Alas, they have taken everything. There isn't a morsel of bread in the house." "You hear, D'Artagnan?" said Athos. "We shall have to look elsewhere for our dinner." "It is all one to me now," said D'Artagnan. "I am no longer hungry." "Faith, neither am I," said Porthos. They carried the man to his bed and called Grimaud to dress the wound. In the service of the four friends, Grimaud had had so frequent occasion to make lint and bandages that he had become something of a surgeon. In the meantime the fugitives had returned to the first room, where they took counsel together. "Now," said Aramis, "we know how the matter stands. The king and his escort have gone this way. We had better take the opposite direction." Athos did not reply, he reflected. "Yes," said Porthos, "let us take the opposite direction. If we follow the escort we shall find everything devoured and die of hunger. What a confounded country this England is! This is the first time I have gone without my dinner for 10 years, and it is generally my best meal." "What do you think, D'Artagnan?" asked Athos. "Do you agree with Aramis?" "Not at all," said D'Artagnan. "I am precisely of the contrary opinion." "What? You would follow the escort?" exclaimed Porthos in dismay. "No, I would join the escort." Athos's eyes shone with joy. "Join the escort!" cried Aramis. "Let D'Artagnan speak," said Athos. "You know he always has wise advice to give." "Clearly," said D'Artagnan, "we must go where they will not look for us. Now they will be far from looking for us among the Puritans. Therefore, with the Puritans we must go." "Good, my friend, good," said Athos. "It is excellent advice. I was about to give it when you anticipated me." "That, then, is your opinion?" asked Aramis. "Yes, they will think we are trying to leave England and will search for us at the ports. Meanwhile we shall reach London with the king. Once in London we shall be hard to find, without considering," continued Athos, throwing a glance at Aramis, "the chances that may come to us on the way." "Yes," said Aramis, "I understand." "I, however, do not understand," said Porthos. "But no matter. Since it is at the same time the opinion of D'Artagnan and of Athos, it must be the best." "But," said Aramis, "shall we not be suspected by Colonel Harrison?" "Egad!" cried D'Artagnan. "He's just the man I count upon. Colonel Harrison is one of our friends. We have met him twice at General Cromwell's. He knows that we were sent from France by Monsieur Mazarin. He will consider us as brothers. Besides, is he not a butcher's son? Well, then, Porthos shall show him how to knock down an ox with a blow of the fist, and I how to trip up a bull by taking him by the horns. That will ensure his confidence." Athos smiled. "You are the best companion that I know, D'Artagnan," he said, offering his hand to the Gascon. "And I am very happy in having found you again, my dear son." This was, as we have seen, the term which Athos applied to D'Artagnan in his more expansive moods. At this moment Grimaud came in. He had stanched the wound and the man was better. The four friends took leave of him and asked if they could deliver any message for him to his brother. "Tell him," answered the brave man, "to let the king know that they have not killed me outright. However insignificant I am sure that his majesty is concerned for me and blames himself for my death." "Be easy," said D'Artagnan. "He will know all before night." The little troop recommenced their march, and at the end of 2 hours perceived a considerable body of horsemen about half a league ahead. "My dear friends," said D'Artagnan, "give your swords to Monsieur Mouston, who will return them to you at the proper time and place, and do not forget you are our prisoners." It was not long before they joined the escort. The king was riding in front, surrounded by troopers, and when he saw Athos and Aramis a glow of pleasure lighted his pale cheeks. D'Artagnan passed to the head of the column, and leaving his friends under the guard of Porthos, went straight to Harrison, who recognized him as having met him at Cromwell's and received him as politely as a man of his breeding and disposition could. It turned out as D'Artagnan had foreseen. The colonel neither had nor could have any suspicion. They halted for the king to dine. This time, however, due precautions were taken to prevent any attempt at escape. In the large room of the hotel a small table was placed for him and a large one for the officers. "Will you dine with me?" asked Harrison of D'Artagnan. "Gad, I should be very happy, but I have my companion, Monsieur du Vallon, and the 2 prisoners whom I cannot leave. Let us manage it better. Have a table set for us in a corner and send us whatever you like from yours." "Good," answered Harrison. The matter was arranged as D'Artagnan had suggested, and when he returned he found the king already seated at his little table, where Perry waited on him, Harrison and his officers sitting together at another table, and, in a corner, places reserved for himself and his companions. The table at which the Puritan officers were seated was round, and whether by chance or coarse intention, Harrison sat with his back to the king. The king saw the 4 gentlemen come in, but appeared to take no notice of them. They sat down in such a manner as to turn their backs on nobody. The officers' table and that of the king were opposite to them. "I' faith, Colonel," said D'Artagnan, "we are very grateful for your gracious invitation, for without you we ran the risk of going without dinner, as we have without breakfast. My friend here, Monsieur du Vallon, shares my gratitude, for he was particularly hungry." "And I am so still," said Porthos, bowing to Harrison. "And how," said Harrison, laughing, "did this serious calamity of going without breakfast happen to you?" "In a very simple manner, Colonel," said D'Artagnan. "I was in a hurry to join you and took the road you had already gone by. You can understand our disappointment when, arriving at a pretty little house on the skirts of a wood, which at a distance had quite a gay appearance, with its red roof and green shutters, we found nothing but a poor wretch bathed. Colonel, pay my respects to the officer of yours who struck that blow." "Yes," said Harrison, laughing, and looking over at one of the officers seated at his table. "When Groslow undertakes this kind of thing, there's no need to go over the ground a second time." "Ah, it was this gentleman?" said D'Artagnan, bowing to the officer. "I am sorry he does not speak French, that I might tender him my compliments." "I am ready to receive and return them, sir," said the officer in pretty good French, "for I resided 3 years in Paris. Then, sir, allow me to assure you that your blow was so well directed that you have nearly killed your man." "Nearly? I thought I had quite," said Groslow. "No, it was a very near thing, but he is not dead." As he said this, D'Artagnan gave a glance at Perry, who was standing in front of the king, to show him that the news was meant for him. The king, too, who had listened in the greatest agony, now breathed again. "Hang it," said Groslow, "I thought I had succeeded better. If it were not so far from here to the house, I would return and finish him. And you would do well if you are afraid of his recovering. For you know, if a wound in the head does not kill at once, it is cured in a week." And D'Artagnan threw a second glance toward Perry, on whose face such an expression of joy was manifested that Charles stretched out his hand to him, smiling. Perry bent over his master's hand and kissed it respectfully. "I've a great desire to drink the king's health," said Athos. "Let me propose it, then," said D'Artagnan. "Do," said Aramis. Porthos looked at D'Artagnan, quite amazed at the resources with which his companion's Gascon sharpness continually supplied him. D'Artagnan took up his camp tin cup, filled it with wine and arose. "Gentlemen," said he, "let us drink to him who presides at the repast. Here's to our colonel, and let him know that we are always at his commands as far as London and farther." And as D'Artagnan, as he spoke, looked at Harrison, the colonel imagined the toast was for himself. He arose and bowed to the four friends, whose eyes were fixed on Charles, while Harrison emptied his glass without the slightest misgiving. The king, in return, looked at the four gentlemen and drank with a smile full of nobility and gratitude. "Come, gentlemen," cried Harrison, regardless of his illustrious captive, "let us be off." "Where do we sleep, Colonel?" "At Thirsk," replied Harrison. "Parry," said the king, rising too. "My horse, I desire to go to Thirsk." "Egad," said D'Artagnan to Athos, "your king has thoroughly taken me, and I am quite at his service." "If what you say is sincere," replied Athos, "he will never reach London." "How so?" "Because before then we shall have carried him off." "Well, this time, Athos," said D'Artagnan, "upon my word you are mad." "Have you some plan in your head, then?" asked Aramis. "Aye," said Porthos. "The thing would not be impossible with a good plan." "I have none," said Athos. "But D'Artagnan will discover one." D'Artagnan shrugged his shoulders, and they proceeded.